Does the black moon howl?
Only for those with an unwavering desire to hear the truth.
Access granted.
You have been selected for an opportunity, an orientation as a trusted associate, if you will, into the secured, contained, and protected files of the Foundation. SCP Unredacted distributes new files for review Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on secure channels on YouTube, Spotify, and scp-unredacted.captivate.fm.
Hey there, SCP fans. My name is Grigori Karpin, and this is Simply Creative People, the show about SCP creatives, be they authors, artists, or off-site content creators like YouTube and TikTok. We're focused on bridging the gap between various fans and serving as an introduction to different concepts and stories on the wiki. So, many welcomes to all, and let's get started. So welcome back to another episode of Simply Creative People. Today we're doing kind of something a little bit different because we don't have a theme or a specific sort of genre of story we're covering. We're going to be talking about something that Kirby, who's our guest, hello. Hi, Captain Kirby.
Oh, hello.
And I'm Grigori Karpin.
What the fuck, man?
And the what the fuck, man,
is... There's only 2 people here.
How many fucking episodes we go and you completely break the fucking format? I'm the new and improved Harry Blank.
I think Grigori just blanked on it.
Grigori just blanked on it.
Names.
Why does everyone say Grigori? It's Grigori.
Because it's variable.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. So, Kirby, you came up with
it's actually Kirby.
You came up. Well, I guess it was a conversation between you and Harry and one of the Discords.
Totally Kirby came up with
Okay, all right. Of talking about how we on the wiki, and this has happened multiple times, we have so many different examples from so many different eras to talk about today, of like recontextualizing something. So like where an established character, an established SCP or a story gets taken for a different twist or a different angle by a later author. You know, it could even happen with the same author. But specifically, and we're not just talking about rewrites. We got one of them we had to talk about that's a rewrite, but a lot of these are just reinterpretations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the things that's really funny about writing for a site that has its roots in like late 2000s, just the most edgelord fiction imaginable, is that people wrote a lot of shit that just wanted to sound badass.
Yeah.
And regardless of if they were successful, there wasn't a lot of thought necessarily put in to every detail that they add. And so you go back and you read some stuff, especially after the site has kind of grown and evolved, and it's gone from the very short fiction, the flash fiction with the creepypasta, into more longer form fiction with more fleshed out storytelling, with more traditional like lore and world building. And you look back at some things and you ask yourself, so do we really need to put a nuke on every single site?
Yeah.
So you get to do a lot of really interesting things like that, and just because there's such a large time gap and so much content that was thought of in that era, there's a lot of fascinating questions that you just have a carte blanche to answer yourself down the line.
Yeah, the thing that really blew me away when Harry talked about you coming up with this idea to me, in a private chat, was just how much this embodies the thing about SCP that I find so fascinating. Other than, it's a cool world and I like writing stories within it. There's also this, there is no canon thing, which we're all aware of. There's no one set canon, thank God, that gives us all the freedom to do contradictory things. But that feeling of secondhand collaboration, because we are putting something out there and making it part of the SCP world, we are effectively opening ourselves up, and previous authors, to reinterpretations of the things that we wrote. I mean, I have weirdly made it like a whole niche of my writing to do that without even planning to. So, I think the thing that I find so fascinating about it is how fluid this universe is and how open it is. I mean, right in the concept of canons is a perfect example of that. So many canons are, hey, it's the SCP universe, only here there's this setting, like your canon, end of death, but so many of them. Here's this very different status quo that we're establishing in this canon, and then that automatically sort of begs the question, hey, what would 682 be like here? What would another famous article or a not so famous article? And I think, other than just, hey, that thing that was written 10 years ago doesn't really hold up, but I think it could be cool if it was like this. There's all these different windows into the subject, and I think it's fascinating.
Exactly. I think one of my other favorite ways that I've heard it described was by Cadaver Commander back when he was writing more for the site, is that when you put your story on the site, it's like you're it's like you're bringing your toys to the sleepover play, and you're allowing everyone else to play with your toys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Of course, leave it to Cadaver Commander to phrase it exactly right.
And well, I mean, this is Cadaver Commander, right?
Yeah.
Moon Champion is a toy that like a dozen different people have played with.
Yeah, of course. I'm
Yes.
surprised you didn't pick yours for that.
Well,
yeah.
I couldn't pick two things from the same storyline by myself.
Yeah, no, I like the one you picked from Dan is the best.
It's short. That's a good thing. It's a short
It's a
one.
fact. It's one of the shorter ones on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I included one of the longer ones on the list too, though, so I'm not entirely innocent.
So today is all about all the different ways in which an author can look at a concept that's already been established on the wiki, and then look back at it and say, well, what if, and then wrote a story about it. And we have some really fascinating, I mean, this is a banger list. Reading through, this was the easiest time I've ever had for reading up articles for the show. Like, just every single one was just, wow, that was great. I mean, I left like 6 comments. Just be like, how did I never comment on this before? This is brilliant,
Yeah.
There's just so many different, and what's great is there's really not one way to do it. Like I said earlier, we have this concept, and we have a few here that are canon specific, but that's not the only way by any means. We have so many different ways of looking back at something that we think, okay, that has narrative potential, but the way that it was handled, I don't like so much. Or maybe, it's cool, but maybe, I have a different idea. And then just inserting yourself. And that can be not successful in some cases. It can feel like just riding on the coattails of something popular. But a lot of times, it's like, look at this rich narrative potential, and a totally different artist has a totally different idea about it. And I don't think a lot of genre fiction works for this, because so often universes are by one, maybe only a few authors. And this being so publicly collaborative, and like I said, passively collaborative, like we can join together to write an article, but you can also just take something that, multiple examples here are just an author saying, hey, I didn't write this thing, but I think it's cool, and I think I have a new idea for it.
Right.
But yeah, so that's basically what we're doing. I did, kind of say, in the outline, for Creative Corner, we oftentimes, Kirby, I hope you've at least listened to an episode, but we try to tackle.
I have.
Okay, good. We try to tackle, not every episode, but we try to tackle, kind of our thought process as creatives to, inspire and give advice or whatever. And I think this is a really useful subject, because I think so many new authors come and say, oh, I want to write about that thing. And so I thought we could all kind of just say what process, and how we think about it when we tackle it, because we did include at least one from each of us as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Kirby, you're the guest. You wanna start off?
Yeah, I would be glad to. Because one of the things, at least for me, is that I rarely start from thinking I want to rewrite X thing.
Right.
It's rather I'm thinking about an idea, and essentially I get the entire recontextualization idea first. Like it isn't like, oh, I feel like this could be different. Let me kind of poke around and see where I can find an interesting idea, usually the inspiration comes, I have the whole recontextualization there. Now, what I think is a really interesting thing about writing these recontextualizations, though, from at least like my like thought process is, one kind of, at least when I very first started out writing here, one kind of quote unquote golden rule that I has been definitely molded over time, something I still think has some degree of value to it, is the value of making an article as readable to as wide an audience as possible, by essentially eliminating the need for like too much background knowledge.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Like not every article obviously needs this, but when you're thinking about contextualization, yeah, it's a nice general rule. But when you're doing these contextualizations, you're immediately throwing it out the back. So your new question you're asking is, okay, so who really is my audience here?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, like how much do I want people to really have to know about this thing I'm writing about? Do they have to know that it, like, do I have to know the one sentence description, or do I need to know the lore, the background? Do I need to know all of the nitty gritty details? There's so many levels, because you're already assuming, well, I can't truly try to write this for someone who's never even read SCP before. That would be missing a lot of context.
Right.
I mean, I think it could still work, you know, if the narrative or the execution is strong enough. You know, if it's something as like a creepy or funny story and it just works without, I mean, honestly, I've run across that because my reading history is so spotty. I read a lot on the wiki, but it's funny the way that I came to it and the way that I kind of, you know, fell into reading about the wiki. It was very targeted. You know, I found something I was interested in and I just read as much as I could about that, and then I would move on to something else. And I have just missed things. Like, you know, there's been episodes where we've talked about GOIs, and I'm like, I've never even looked at one of these before. And wow, it's fantastic. You know, like, I mean, I knew what Wondertainment was, basically, but I really hadn't read a lot of articles about Wondertainment until we did that episode. And, you know, I think it's totally possible. I think, like, for example, the Lurk D article that I picked really works on its own. And then the last, like, twist of what we're talking about is, you know, it's real good. But if it never showed its hand, I would still think it was a pretty good tale.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and to me, though, that, like, you make a good point. But, like, to me, that's essentially just on the far end of the spectrum of, okay,
sure. Yeah,
technically I'm writing for people who, like my intention with the story is for an audience that has some understanding of what I'm going for. But you're right. You can try to write your reinterpretation in such a way that it requires effectively zero context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always something to aim for. By no means do I think it's a fucking requirement.
Yeah, like you can't do it every time, and sometimes you'll be doing something that's solely for people who've already read something. But it is kind of a clever hard mode, extra points achievement sort of thing to do, to write it so that it works as a story completely on its own, and the recontextualization of the existing thing makes it better for people who recognize it. That's like the A++ version.
Like, I think
exactly.
I like to, like, maybe I'm fooling myself, but like for anthology last October, I did essentially What If Pinocchio, but like Eldritch Horror. And I really, really, really focused on writing a story that if you know the story of Pinocchio, you're going to get these references, but you don't need them. And you know, I just think that is always something good to aim for. But you're right, it's a spectrum, because so many of these wouldn't work that way. You are specifically targeting an audience that knows. Like, for example, the one we're going to talk about of mine later on, that was absolutely for people who already knew who Clef is, and then were hopefully surprised by this newer version of him. Same thing. We're
just surprised to see the author's name attached to it.
Yeah. It's such a funny thing. I've written like 4 or 5 stories with him now.
So weird.
I know.
We were doing the Canon Renaissance contest, and we're reading through the Resurrection stuff because both of our teams were doing Resurrection, and he's just like reading all these Clef tales going, I hate Dr. Clef. And then a year
Not
later,
the author, to clarify. I quite like a lot of
No.
Clef's stories.
No, and
the
Dr. Clef
character.
is a great author and also a cool person. But the character,
Yeah, and how it
But
kind of
don't.
metastasized as this goofy, Donald Duck-like character. But actually, Elmer Fudd would even be more appropriate. And it's just like it never even occurred to me. Hey, could I take this character and write something? And it was, and we'll get to it eventually, but like the inspiration for it was really hilarious, like off the wall. Like somebody had to like basically like grab me around the ears and say, you should do this. But anyway.
I feel like every tale author on the site, or everyone who just writes enough tales, at some point kind of converges to doing their own Clef tale.
yep.
Like it's just the
happens.
beck and call of writing for the site. Like I have one. I believe mine is, for some reason, mine is linked from the new 166 rewrite, which I didn't ask for.
Nice. Which is great.
Yeah.
And I almost wish we had picked that one, but we have a lot of great episodes.
There's so many.
I know.
There's
There's so
on
many.
this list.
And like,
Like that's what happened to me and CanRankCon is nothing that I had written before that contest wasn't completely original my stuff. Like everything I wrote before that was my series that I was making up. And then the next thing I did was just splatter of author avatars and other people's SCPs for Tales. It was just out of nowhere. And since then I have found it hard to put those toys back in the box because some of them are fun to play with.
that's even why I joined CanRankCon for the Resurrection contest. Callie Bold was our team leader and like recruited me. And I was like, you know what? I just haven't done this yet. This is going to be, even if it's, even if it doesn't work for me, and it ended up working pretty well, but the challenge of it was interesting. I still made up 2 brand new characters for it though.
Of course.
I can't help it.
You need to introduce some human beings if you're going to write solely about other Avatar characters.
But hilariously, now the 2 of us have written something like 10 plus articles with Sophia Light, and I just fucking love that character. Like,
Sophia Light is one of the few like original author avatars that like you don't even need to change a lot with for her to be like a fun character to use.
Yeah, she was already
like a
pretty
human being.
nuanced. Yeah,
she's got a personality. She's a person.
which all the credit goes to Light for making an author avatar that wasn't a cartoon. Yeah,
Right.
but so my take on the process, I'm often the opposite of you. I'm often specifically going in with like a target. Recently, last year or so, Ip and I did, I have a GOI named Vicanity Technical Media, and somebody suggested I should start crossing over with like established GOIs and established characters, and I hadn't done that at all. I mean, there's something like 30, 40 articles up there now. And we decided we were going to do a Dado article. What if Dado hired Victim to write him a commercial campaign, an advertising campaign? And my entire goal was, first of all, I read like 5 Dado things. I already knew totally who Dado was. I read like 5 Dado things, and my goal the entire time was, I'm going to push Dado's boundaries as a character hard enough until he breaks character. and that was successful. But like, I will have like, okay, this is what I want. I want to I want Clef to be in a situation where he's not the star, where it's all about a buddy, a duo of personalities and how they bounce off each other. And I want to establish him as the Clef that we all know, but also start revealing like there's a little bit more humanity to him. Was
that Dado one done with? Was that done with Ip?
Yeah, I thought I said that.
And I think he probably did, and my brain is completely full of holes. That just reminds me of Ip's recontextualized, rewritten, completely made up, different origin story for Dado that he did with that.
Oh my god!
Of drugs, that article that
was great.
The twist is that it was a backstory for him, and it actually works and doesn't ruin it, which is a hell of an accomplishment.
Yeah, it was this really serious fucking article. It was good. Ip's really good at that. He's done a bunch of recontextualization.
One of the ones that I picked for the day.
Yeah, a great one. Harry, what about you? Do you have like a certain thought process when you?
Well, it's come up a few times that I'm a maximalist in terms of the canon, and I have the Grant Morrison thing in my head where I like most of the stuff that's existed, and the stuff that I don't like, I kind of enjoy how I don't like it. So most stuff that's happened on the wiki that can have happened has happened in my mind, so I like bringing all of these things in and tying them in, but for me it's always just a question of whether it'll actually add something that making up something unique on my own would not add. So I try to only pick up the things that I think are uniquely interesting enough that I wouldn't be able to come up with something that fits in with my story better to do it elsewise. So I do have the occasional crossover, and I do have things slide in, and it'll be happening more and more as time goes on. I'm even at present, I've been working through an incredible amount of mental math to figure out how I can make it so that there is no anti-memetics division happened in my canon, which is an extraordinarily difficult and also extremely dangerous thing to do, because that's not entirely unlike trying to write Citizen Kane into your movie series without coming across as a pretentious twat who doesn't know what he's doing, because it's a very dangerous thing to try and fit time in there.
Yeah.
But it's because some of these things are so good and so useful and so interesting that if you want to build something big enough, you kind of want to work it in there, and you want to play with the toys. You really need to practice a lot before you play with some of these toys, because they're easy to break.
Oh yeah. So from a personal experience, following off that exact thought, and Harry, you know this, I set my series, which at first was all I was doing, like 30 years in the past, specifically so none of the characters that are established, none of the established things within the wiki would matter. And I just threw in a reference to the Deva in that first article, thinking, well, that'd be cool, but I don't even know, enough about them to do it. And, suffice it to say that the entire series is about the Deva, really, and then led to me writing the fucking Deva hub, which didn't ever exist. It's right. It's
and
so
I did the
funny.
same thing with memetics. I wasn't going to write about memetics.
Right.
I had no knowledge of it, and then I wrote 1 or 2 SCPs about it, and now it's the theme of my series.
Yeah. It is insidious, the way that this stuff works out. But yeah, that's another reason why I thought this subject was such a good one, because, when I first started out, I was just like, I'm just going to use this. I'm going to carve out a niche within this wider universe because I like the context of the universe, and I'm just going to play around with it. And then, Can Con and numerous other things kind of broke me out of that shell. And
I think this was the fastest. I think this was the fastest Grigori ever agreed to an episode concept. Kirby pitched this to me, and then I pitched it to Grigori, and he immediately went, "Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea."
You've only ever pitched 2 other things. Everything else is me.
No, I mean, usually we go through the list of GOIs.
Oh,
and I don't know if I want to do that one. I don't know if I want to do that. but in this case, Kirby came along and recontextualized our podcast.
Good. Yeah, I was immediately like, boom, let's do that.
Yeah. I want to circle back to really something you talked about, having practice to play with certain toys. Because that's one of the things that I think is actually really interesting about the nature of a lot of the different types of payment on the site. Because there's some there's some toys that everyone can and should play with. And when I say this, I'm not meaning you're not allowed to play with this toy, but there are some characters on the site where if you just kind of drop the name in and you weren't really thinking about how you're writing this character or why this character is acting the way it is, people will raise eyebrows. Because while there is no canon, usually for example, if a character starts off very well established and then you just do a hard write, unless you're kind of justifying that hard write as you go, people will probably might raise an eyebrow at you. If you write, say, if you write, say, a Sophia Light that is completely goofy and wacky and doesn't take her job seriously, people will be like, sure, but also, why?
Yeah.
Why did you even use light for this?
Yeah, because
you use light for this.
Yeah, because the rule of there is no canon means, sure, you can write whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to accept it. It still has to, land.
Right. It's not carte
Exactly.
blanche to be lazy.
Exactly.
And some of these things require a great deal of effort. I wouldn't just sit down and start writing a second High-Toth article. I don't know the first fucking thing about that, and that requires some homework.
Yes, that's a good example. One of the other, honestly, trying to write a Joey Fucknuts, if someone tried to write a Joey Fucknuts article after Cadaver, like there are like 2 people I would trust with that. Like there's just it's some things where like if you're doing it, you are taking on pretty much a risk that like there's a lot of people who are already very invested in the way that this thing currently exists. You can change it, but like you're gonna have to convince some people you're doing a good thing.
Yeah. Right, and even if you're not going to change it, it can be so difficult to get it right in the first place. Because I remember now, I won't read that tale I wrote with Moon Champion and Sol Susor, because I occasionally look at it again, and I'm afraid to look at it because I remember how hard it was to write it so that Moon Champion isn't fucking irritating. Because it's such a tiny, thin little line between really funny and really annoying to read and like obnoxiously silly. And Cadaver Commander, of course, just nails it in 1233. But trying to do it, I'm afraid of looking at it again and going, oh shit, he is irritating.
Yeah, I think
be really careful with some of this stuff.
I feel like Spectre is similar. Not quite.
Not
quite as. Yeah. I think Spectre gives a little more leeway because he is inherently silly.
Spectre gives no leeway. Gives only
is that the Mortis?
Spectre
is that the SCP by
SCP is by Mortis, I think. I forget who did it.
I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. The guy who wrote 3008. It's another one of his SCPs, right?
Oh,
long since I've thought about the Spectre.
It might be. I'm not sure actually. Now that I'm
I need to check this now because I think I might have crit that.
Our first excellent.
The other
I type loudly into Chrome /search.
Yes, it's by Mortos, and I did crit that.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about being around for as long as I haven't been in the position that I've been. I crit so many articles that like people know about. I'm like, I remember when I suggested that change.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, I have secretly written the ending to so many articles.
I didn't realize that was Mortos. That's funny.
Yeah, no. Mortos has so many bangers. So many bangers.
Oh, yeah. That's hilarious though that's also by the same person who did 3008. Like that's
weird.
It's a very different article.
Yeah.
Mortos has an insane hit rate. Like you feel like because people don't like know his name that well. But so people kind of think, oh, that's the 3008 guy. No, he just wrote banger after banger after banger, and his hit rate is nutty.
There are a few people where it's very strange how disconnected their name is from their famous things. It's just sitting in my head that doesn't Hercules Rockefeller have 2 of the highest rated SCPs on the entire site, and like nobody knows who the hell that is.
That's a fucking terrific author name.
I think that's both Yuleman and the.
It's Yuleman and a really old one, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just funny how that works.
Yeah, having recently become friends with Assertive Roland, and that's the perfect example. Like, the
author of 140.
Yeah, sorry, yes, the creator of the Deva, and how like unconnected he was for such a long time to the wiki, and how many people have written about the Deva, and how many times I've had conversations with somebody, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, I was talking to Assertive Roland about it, and they're like, who? And it's like, no, God. But I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with formatting for SCPs. It's not always super transparent who's written it. Like, you have to click on the history, you have to click on the discussion. If it's old enough, the practice of doing an author post wasn't even a thing yet, No,
it was. Like, I had this experience. I think my favorite one was when Pepper's Ghost came back to the site in 2018. Like Pepper's Ghost. If you don't know who Pepper's Ghost is, Pepper's Ghost wrote 4000 and
amongst many other another murder monster.
Pepper's Ghost wrote I can't believe I remember.
A Good Boy? Didn't he write Good Boy with Hippo? Right?
He wrote for what it's worth,
and
he did help with The Good Boy. Technically, if you were to ask them, and I'm gonna say this, that was it was like 70%, 30% Pepper's Ghost. But they did collaborate on it. He definitely did help with it. I'm saying this because I remember that they've made that distinction before.
Sure.
But the other thing and when I say they, I mean specifically Pepper's Ghost, because I know Hippo doesn't care. But the other thing, but like when he came back to the site, I didn't know who Pepper's Ghost was. Had been around for like maybe 8 months at that point, or like 5 months, something like that. And I go and I'm just like looking for Crit, and he pops into the chat, and I'm like, yeah, I'll give you Crit. And we're just chatting. I have no clue who he is. I'm like, so have you written this site before? And he's like, well, let me tell you.
I mean, it's just the danger of the medium to some extent. I mean, we are weirdly anonymous. I mean, we even use anonymous author names.
And people come and go in phases, and sometimes people come and disappear. Pepper's Ghost his name is particularly amusing because Pepper's Ghost can sometimes sort of disappear and be difficult to contact.
Yeah.
I remember that the first time he came back when I was a member of the site, he completely filled up the list of latest articles with what appeared to be completely blank pages and wouldn't explain to anybody what he was doing until he finished like a 3-hour process of creating this insane amount of code that made his author page look cool. That's
right.
Oh, I remember that.
Everybody was like, what is it? What is he doing? What are these pages? And then it became amazing. Pepper's Ghost is great.
Yeah, that author page is nice.
Yeah, love Peppers.
But let's get started. Let's start talking about some articles. So this first one, and what we're going to do is because we each picked about 3 or 4, we'll each kind of introduce the ones we picked, and then the other 2 will kind of feed in. So this first one was picked by you, Kirby, and this is Pila by Troy L. So give us a little bit of a spiel here. What is this?
Yeah, so this one's a step back in the time machine.
Oh yeah. It's 12 years old, almost.
It's by
Troy. 12 years old.
It's by Troy L. Yeah.
Back when we had, it was back when we have. Well, I actually have to do a quick count. It was back when we only had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think it was back when we only had like 8 001 proposals. And Troy L is like, you know what? I'm going to do a tale series kind of about each 001 proposal. Not necessarily like a contiguous tale series, but like they're all based around one, and they're all like different kind of expansions upon them. It's called Project Thaumiel. And Pila is the Project Thaumiel entry about what a lot of people... I'm saying this, I believe I'm saying this, that I'm not about to have a particularly hot take here, think is a relatively mid 001 proposal.
Yeah, I don't think it's... I mean, I'm sure
the hottest take in the world.
I'm sure it's someone's favorite.
Enjoy the concept. There's just not a lot to it after you get the concept.
It's fun, but like yeah, exactly. It's fun, but there's not like a lot of depth on its face. And this is like how I would describe this tale relative to the 001 proposal. Is like when a TV series has a movie as its climax. The TV series was fine, but wow, that movie was good. To actually get into what the tale is about. First of all, the 001 it's about, the sheaf of papers, essentially the idea is that the sheaf of papers is the stack of all SCPs that exist. And whenever you turn the page...
Jonathan Ball.
Yes, it's by Jonathan
Ball's proposal.
I don't think that's the actual name of the author, but that is the name on the proposal.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah, this was back when they did like the author avatar instead of the name of the author, and Jonathan Ball isn't even close to the name of the actual author, unlike the rest of them.
Keep going, I'm looking this up.
Yeah, so it's like Mackenzie is Elena's, I think.
Elena's, yeah,
exactly. So anyways, the idea is that when you turn a page and you see a new like SCP file, that actually instantiates the SCP in reality. So the way that new SCPs like come into being is by people just turning the pages on the sheaf of paper. So Pila is about poor Dr. Ronald Stinson.
Good old Ronald Stimson. Everyone remembers Ronald. We're all good. We're so sorry to have lost Ronald.
I mean,
there's like 15 different jokes that need to be explained here, Kirby.
I know. But essentially, he clearly something has gone terribly wrong, and it is his duty to essentially perform the last resort, where he goes with the suitcase down to a deep room, opens it up, and has the sheaf of papers in front of him. And he has been ordered effectively to go through the sheaf of papers to find an anomaly that will fix everything.
And it's kind of unclear.
It doesn't happen?
Yeah, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, you know it doesn't happen? Yeah, spoiler alert. That's enough time for you to have clicked off and gone Reddit. Spoiler alert. It culminates to the sheaf of paper no longer is really talking about SCPs. It's just different articles about Ronald.
Yeah.
Until the glorious last entry, SCP 9999, a gun. What's the gun for? Well, it's for Ronald to decommission himself.
Yeah, so trigger warnings if you're gonna read it. There's
apologies.
Oh no. That's no.
Yeah,
you're fine. But yeah, they do a really good. I
Harry.
really like. Yeah, there is a trigger. That's right.
I'm sorry, I can't.
No, puns are important.
I can, but I choose not to.
The thing I really like about it is these were a bunch of like ideas that got thrown out. That aren't necessarily like real SCPs. Like, I mean, really quickly, it's way past the number that was in existence at that point. I think maybe even starts with numbers that were in existence at that point.
Yep.
Like, but the one that they got that's 3247, the Atomic Ghost, like that sounds, I want that, whatever that is. I want that in my life. But yeah, Troy does a really good job here because there are not full articles within this tale. It's just these little snippets, like literally just the number, the title, object class, and not even the first line. And it just adds to this sense of tension. Like long before the twist happens and the articles are talking to Ronald, it's already kind of like, because each one is broken up by him, saying things, I hate this. This is terrible. He wants to die. He wanted to be sure he deserved it by now. Positive. Just it's really well paced for such a short thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it took this idea that was fun, that there's this pile of papers that the minute you take off the cover sheet, then that is the discovery of a new SCP in reality, because the one it describes is actually real. That's a fun thing. It's not nearly as interesting or landmark as so many other 001 proposals, but this is taking that fairly interesting Pandora's box, idea, and telling a really brief but a really kind of interesting story. I really like that it's setting up, that this horrible thing has happened, that everyone's dead, and maybe it's something that Ronald was a part of or the Foundation was a part of. It's some horrible XK class, whatever scenario, but that's not the point. We never really find out one way or wrong. It's just about the desperation of somebody looking through these sheaves, and it's really good.
Yeah. Project Thaumiel is really an interesting idea because when it started out, they were all Troy, right? Like Troy was going to write one for every 001, and then eventually stopped, and then other authors took it up, so that a lot of the Project Thaumiel entries are now by other authors, and it's I think still basically. I haven't seen a new one in ages, but the idea is that you can still do them for the 001s that don't have them. The names are all Latin plays on the name of the person who's supposed to have written the 001. Pila is Latin for ball, for example. If anybody ever does one for I.H. Pickman's, it'll probably be me, and it'll be called Plectrum as a pick. That's how they all work. But what I really like is that the main character of this is Dr. Ronald Stimson. There's no way Kirby doesn't know about Dr. Ronald Stimson, right? You know Dr. Ronald Stimson, don't you, Kirby? Kirby, are you there?
Ignore me Googling.
Okay. Dr. Ronald Stimson has an author page on the SCP Wiki. And if you go and look at Dr. Ronald Stimson's personnel file on the wiki, you'll see that all of their SCPs were either deleted or rewritten, and there are no SCPs left by Dr. Ronald Stimson.
Oh, no.
Because Dr. Ronald Stimson never existed, and Troy wrote a fake author page for him.
I didn't know that. That's so good.
So it's a tale. It's a tale that looks exactly like an author page, wherein the author has essentially been erased from existence because all of their works have been lost from the SCP Wiki. So Dr. Ronald Stimson's personnel file is a reimagining of the concept of an author page.
That's so good.
So when I saw him pop up in this, I was like, Oh shit. Because if you look at really old authors' author pages, you'll see a lot of the SCPs they have listed as having written will be crossed out because they are no longer on the site. And if you go to Ronald's page, every single SCP he's got has a cross through it.
Oh my god.
Mimetic Demons, The Reckoning, The Mountain of Madness, The Eternal Fanzine, they're all gone.
You don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am. Something is wrong.
Yes, it's like Ronald becomes a pattern screamer inside his own author page.
So good.
SCP.
Yeah. So this was a great, I think, perfect intro to it because Project Thamiel is such a interesting project. I mean, it is kind of sad that it's kind of fallen off, but whatever. It's still an interesting project to just take these often grandiose, not in this case, but often grandiose ideas in 001 proposals and then, write a tale about them from a different angle. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm going through the new ones. I'm trying to see what is the most recent one, because there are a few relatively recent ones. I think the most recent one is potentially Floss or Flows. I don't actually know how that's supposed to be pronounced.
Yeah, me either.
It has to be.
Oh, there's one. I didn't realize that someone did one for my 001 proposal. I can't believe I missed that.
Nice.
Who did it,
OO Geek.
Cool.
Someone who I've interacted with OO Geek only a few times. So
very talented. Very talented.
Yes. I'll have to put this on my reading list at some point. But yeah.
But yeah. So
I mean, I even have an idea for doing one for my my one with IP. But yeah, it's an interesting project, and it'd be interesting to see more of them.
Yeah, it is really cool.
And then lastly, before we move on, I just have to say my favorite excerpt from Pilo. Duke of Nevermore goes so hard.
It does. Duke of Nevermore is amazing. Just read that. 6449 Duke of Nevermore. Euclid description. SCP-6449 first contacted the Foundation after becoming aware of his omniscience and realizing that he was a danger to the So good.
So good.
And then it's so funny is that he's got one for Dr. Wondertainment, and then later on somebody didn't know one for Dr. Wondertainment.
Yes.
That's very funny.
The one that's the multiple choice background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because SCP-3246, hell.
Just hell.
It's just fucking hell.
Oh,
that is 100% something early site authors probably had done. Obviously,
there's actually a few. There's a few 3000s that are about hell. There's the hell freezes over one. There's all's well that ends hell. I think there's at least one more.
Spike Brennan has a gateway to hell or a circle to hell, portal to hell, or something like that. Yeah. There's a few. Yeah. There's another one where
it's funny how close a number it is though.
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right, but let's move on. So one of the ones that I picked was Probe H9 by Lurk D, who that should be a name that's familiar to everybody. And unsurprisingly, this is a story about an AI, or kind of.
Doesn't do a lot of stories about AIs, but this is an exception.
This is different, yeah. So essentially, what this is it's a log of a probe, like a deep space probe, that's getting communicated back with an operator or programmer or whatever on a space station or a ship. It's really kind of unclear. Going into this region of unexplored space. It's kind of follows two patterns. We'll get this little snippet of the conversation between the probe and the operator, and then we get a snippet of the investigator interacting or interviewing the operator after whatever it is went wrong. So we get back and forth between present and the past, which is a mechanism I really like, both in my the stuff I like to read, but also I like
you're
to
addicted to it, and it works well.
I do that a lot in my stories as well. I think a cold open is the best thing on the planet. But we've got this probe identifying a human SOS signal, and they keep moving in that direction, but no matter how far it goes, days pass, and no matter how far they go, the probe is always estimating the time away from the signal source at 4.2 hours away. They're never see, and it's like the operator's like, no, you should be here in this quadrant. You should already be there. And there's this sense of like constantly moving towards something, and that thing always moving further away, further and further into the darkness until it, reaches a planetoid or some sort of space body. It's unclear. And then, ostensibly crashes into it. It's a really good, it's kind of tension to it that I really like kind of building. And it's really unclear at first, at least to me, what it is that it's talking about. And then we get kind of towards the end, and the interviewer closes up the case and says you're not cleared to know what this is about, and sends the interview to be filed away with Q087. Because this is all about like the stare, and then it's like one of those things where a line at the end of an article like puts everything in a different perspective, because it's like, it is like the stairs.
Away. It keeps getting deeper in, but it keeps getting farther away, and it can hear it, and then suddenly there's the fucking scare face. It's like, god damn it.
Yeah, like it's so good. Like this one was done in this way that it's like I didn't need to know anything about it, and I didn't read the comments first. Someone suggested it, and I just kind of read through it because I saw how short it was, because this one like the last one is pretty brief, and it's all dialogue, so I love dialogue. And we get to the end and it's like, oh my god. I mean, I don't even think much about 087. Like it's one of those ones that typifies the early
much to think about.
Well executed, don't get me wrong, but it's just it's a jump scare essentially, in written form, and it perfectly typifies the creepypasta, origins of the website. And here is this fairly, original, like really original. Let's just completely throw out the original setting. Let's completely throw out the original everything about it. This is clearly sometime far in the future. And yet this could easily still be a story that was linked within 087, and it would make perfect sense because, well, what natural laws does that anomaly even follow? Why wouldn't this also work? It's fucking great. I love it.
Yeah. One of the things that I actually really appreciate about this is that, like, if you took out all of the flash forwards, then this would read like almost beat for beat like one of the 087 logs, right?
Yep.
But then what the flash forward does, that it contextualizes kind of like what is the debriefing after one of those 087 logs. Now there's some differences here in that the people doing those 087 logs, like the doctors conducting them, they know what they're doing. No one's gonna come up to them and like actually question them about what they're doing. But there's still like this interesting like people being like, well, what is happening? And there's this kind of interesting question of like, you get to kind of take a peek behind the curtains of the fun bureaucracy that is dealing with this kind of an anomaly.
Right. Absolutely. And that more so than the log itself adds to the tension, because why is this investigator so almost interrogating this drone operator, and what is the what went bad? And it builds up tension in this really great way. And what's funny is there isn't a big disaster at the end. The probe just like crashed into something. That's not the point. The point is it's setting you up so that when you realize this is about that famous SCP, you can figuratively slap your forehead and be like, oh shit. It's really well executed.
It's clever.
Yeah, so many of these are going to be like at the end, just be like, wow, that was really smart. So many of these examples are like, I know. Yeah, of course.
Don't you all want to be able to have somebody say, hey, that was really smart after you did something? Recontextualize.
Yeah.
Recontextualize yourselves as really smart.
So I did for once actually write down when each of these was written. Pila was in 2011. And what's interesting about this one is this one was in 2015. So this is, a solid, 7 or 8 years after 087 was originally written, somewhere in there. So this is a whole different generation. This is a different concept. This is also, I think, typifying the other thing about this subject that I really think is important is that when you are it goes back to what you were saying, Kirby, about who's your audience. When you're going and recontextualizing something that's 4 years ago, 5 years, 10 years ago, you're trying to, in some ways, modernize that concept so that it would be acceptable to the audience that was out there reading the wiki at that point. Like, what does the audience expect? Now, there's a wide range of what people expect on the wiki, but this adds so much more nuance than the original article did because Lord Z smartly probably thought, A, it was interesting, but B, no one's going to want to just read one of these logs by itself. That's not what we do anymore.
Here's the thing. Do you know why this article was written?
No.
Do you know what it was written for?
No.
The 2015 reimagining contest?
Oh, that's very appropriate.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised in retrospect. We only got one out of this contest, which honestly, it's one of these things where there's so many examples on the site.
Yeah.
It's clear that there's a lot more material to pull from, but for what it's worth, I also forgot that this contest even happened until you suggested this article for me, and I scrolled down. I just saw the tags at the bottom. I'm like, oh right, they've done a whole contest about this.
I haven't read any of the other ones. I just opened the tag, and I'll be damned if I have. I'm pretty sure I haven't read a single one of these other ones.
No, but
wow, this dinosaur is pretty well known.
Contest. This contest has 15 entries and only one SCP. The rest were tales. What a weird world you guys used to live in.
I know.
It's like people
back in the day,
good stuff just win the contest.
Back in the day.
Tales
I wasn't even around back then. This is 2 years after. This is 2 years after I or before I even got here.
One of these is so well named. Hello, I am an eldritch horror. That is such a cool title. I hope it's a good article, but it's such a cool title. I'm gonna read these later. All right. I think that's just a really cool. I think we should just do another contest like that. That's just there's so much rich narrative potential.
We kind of did that. RenCon was kind of this.
That's true.
I kind of like this version a little better, just because there's more freedom than RenCon, because canons are a little tighter in scope.
Yeah.
But it was good for a team contest version of this. But I think we could just do this part too.
Yeah, and specifically it being a tail contest, I think would really work.
Tail contests, my beloved.
Yeah, me too.
For sure.
All right, but we don't really have to spend much more time on that. It's just great. Go read it. As always, all these are linked in the show descriptions. Please, listeners, go and read. And if you have an account, think about upvoting. That's the whole point of the show.
Always be plugging.
Well, I'm plugging somebody else's stuff, but later on I'll plug my stuff.
Still plugging.
Yeah, all three of us picked something we wrote, so I mean.
Yeah, but
as we all should have.
Yeah,
absolutely.
A lot of times these shows we can't because of the subject matter, but this one, especially you and me, Harry, I was like, I'm gonna pick one. I've done
Clearly
so many
we
of these.
think they're good tales, or we wouldn't have posted them to the SCP Wiki, so
That's
obviously
right.
they're good.
I could have just picked 4 of my own tales. I have more than enough entries that count.
For sure.
Yeah, me too.
Oh shit, we should have done that instead.
That would have been really funny.
And just never acknowledge it and never credit who wrote them. Just be like, somebody later on be like, wait a minute.
The author was amazing.
Wait a minute. All right, Harry, you picked Secure Facility Dossier Protected Site 7.
I did.
Which is funny.
By Rounder House.
By Rounder House. I did not know this existed before we did this. I don't know how I missed it.
You didn't?
I think maybe I was just working like crazy or something.
Yeah.
But super cool. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so site dossiers I don't know if we've had one of these come up on the
I don't think we have.
In our 30 several episodes. Site dossiers are what they sound like. They are descriptive dossiers about the facilities of the SCP Foundation. And they were created, somewhere in the early 2010s. There was a brief flurry of them. DJ Cactus had one. I think was probably involved in creating the format, although I don't remember. There's one by McLeod. There's a few of them that came out in fairly quick sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And bless their hearts, there was a totally new format. They're totally new articles. They hadn't existed like this before, and that's why they suck.
A lot of them
really dull. They're completely empty of content because they basically go, here's how many people work at this site, here's a brief description of when it was made, and here's a list of the SCPs. It's a bad, boring format the way they originally came up with it because they were trying something new. They were doing something that hadn't been done before, and sometimes it's kind of a boring thing. So when I started at the site, it was generally frowned upon to post site dossiers because people were always like, oh, fuck, not another one of these 217 janitors work at this facility thing. So when I posted mine, I wrote the departments who worked there. I gave them all the chance to describe themselves and make jokes about themselves and describe their work and everything. And that was my way of format screwing the format and doing something different. Which, of course, now like 10 different people have done that version. So that mine doesn't look original anymore. But now it's generally agreed that you can post these things because it's also generally agreed that if you do, you always have to reimagine the format somehow. You can't just post a site dossier the way it would exist in the real world where they're all dull descriptions and here's what's on sublevel 4. You have to do something original. They're basically tales in the format of a site dossier. And so Rounderhouse is one for his Red Tape series, which is Rounderhouse's reimagining of SCP period. That's what this is. It's his personal canon of completely reimagining.
And I was going to include one, but then I promised him that we were not going to talk about any of those until we have him on to talk about them. So
so this seemed like a safe one to throw on here because this is the canon that 6000 is attached to. This is the canon that the Gold proposal and the Jade proposal are both attached to, and this is the canon that his Tale series about Agent Ari Katsaros, I think it is attached to, and this has all become fairly big, and it's all fairly recent because he finally decided he wanted to have his own canon.
Yeah, it was like
because
8
most of
months
Rounder
ago.
stuff was disconnected for a long time, and it's all taken off.
I used to literally tell him like, you should like revisit this one when he would have me like crit stuff. I'm like, this is a good. I don't want to do that. Like this is like back in 2019, 2020. I don't do that. I'm glad you. He's like, I'm glad you like that.
Eventually, all of his friends had pet cannons, and he was just like, I don't have one. And then he just blitzed having one, and it works. Because what this one is it's a site dossier format screw about RISA. Not everyone agrees on what this stands for, the Records and Administration Security Administration. Records and Archival. Records and Archives. Records and... See, there's like 10 different versions. Records and Archives Administration. It's...
It's the people who keep the papers in order. It's like, you know how there's a filing cabinet in offices? They're like the SCP's filing cabinet.
That's right. He calls it Records, Archival, and Information Security Administration. That's one of the different ways people have used it.
Well, he's been very successful in that. If he's not the one that kept brought up with it, that's literally all I think about it now.
Oh yeah, RISA's been around for ages.
No. I know that. Yeah.
I think one of the earliest occurrences of RISA is in Able in like 07-9's
It's a long. Yeah, I know it's been around for a long time.
Because there's that joke about it's a thing. But yeah, they're the Foundation's record keepers. They're the Foundation's archival system. They're the Foundation's IT techs. They're the Foundation's computer people. They're all of those things at once.
Yeah, a lot of articles will start with like an information, like as a good way to like cue you in of like what's this thing about?
If there's something going on in the article that the author thinks you in your ignorance will think is a mistake by the author, like if there's a format screw in the article, or if the people are behaving inappropriately and it's very obvious they should get their jobs reviewed, and the author doesn't want you thinking that's because you don't know what you're doing, there will be a RISA notice saying, hey man, we know there's something fucking weird in the information in this file. I think, like, just be aware.
I think the first time I used one was in the First Victim, because I was so afraid that because it was so very different than anything most people. It was going to be like almost no SCP and then 99% just like recordings of these weird radio shows.
Right. So I use it a lot of times to defend myself as well. If I think people are going to think I fucked something up, I'll go, no, Ryza will explain to you that it's okay.
I mean, like, Ryza has been around for like explaining format screws since like the first list page article.
Right.
Or like the earliest list pages articles. Yeah. Like that's what I use Ryza for like 90% of the time is like, hey, this is a list pages article. Remember to click at the end because this isn't it.
Yeah.
There's more. I wrote more. Please read it.
Right, because it'll say something like that. You were reviewing an outdated version of this file. Please click the link at the end of this file to review the current one. Yeah, that's the most common one. I think There's No Site 5 has a Ryza.
There's No Site 5 should have one. It would make a lot of sense if it did.
Let's see. Did it? Come on, Hippo. It doesn't.
Of course, Hippo wouldn't do that.
To be fair, I feel like that would have taken the wind out of the sails a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, that's what it's often used for. The Don Quixote one uses a Ryza.
Don Quixote does.
I'm sure.
For sure.
But anyway, what Ryza's purpose for here is the Site 7 site dossier is about Ryza's headquarters, which is because it was awesome. I'm sure that was 100% of the reasoning. Because it was awesome, Ryza's headquarters is a gigantic collection of oil derricks interconnected with bridges.
Mother base.
It's Mother Base, or the Big Shell, or Kojima and Roundhouse
Outer Heaven.
Similar.
Outer Heaven.
Or Outer Heaven. Kojima and Roundhouse have very similar architectural thoughts. It's off the coast of Alaska. It's in Norton Sound. It's a great big thing and a great big thing of water that's very dangerous to drive boats through. And it's out there being the technological headquarters of the Foundation's archives. And what this article does is, because the article title tells us this is unsynced, meaning this isn't the current version that would appear on the SCP Wiki's database, it means that we're looking at Maria Jones's personal annotations on it, because Maria Jones is the character who is most often made the director of Ryza, the head archivist, as it were. And she's annotating her site's history and descriptions and everything with musings about her career building up Ryza at the end of her career, and also I think there's a few notes from her earlier in her career. So this makes a character out of Maria Jones, who is basically a byline on a Ryza note for most people, who's not a character in hardly anything. I think she's used in some resurrection stuff. It's used in placeholder proposal, used in various other things. But
I think she was first used in 2998 from the 2000 contest. There she was given like a character and voice, but after that, nah.
Yeah, like nobody bothers. And this was making a character editor, because one of the things that Rounder's series does is it tries to make characters out of the O5s, tries to make characters out of the old author avatars. It even recontextualizes authors who've been almost completely forgotten and makes their author avatars into characters who matter. And that's what this is. This is trying to recontextualize the characters. It's recontextualizing site dossiers, and it's also got notes from Maria Jones recontextualizing the data in the recontextualization. So it's very meta, and it ends up essentially being a tale about this woman's life creating this organization and explaining why Ryza is actually a very important, very cool, very big deal thing. Kind of like that old ethics committee tale that goes, actually, we're not a joke, we're scary.
Right.
This goes, we're not just a bunch of shitheads behind computers. We're the muscle of the Foundation's information technology.
We're Big Brother.
That's right.
Effectively. Yeah, I really liked, it's so funny. The first couple of paragraphs, I was foolishly getting this mixed up with There Is No Site 5. And I was like, is that 5 or 7? And then I had to look it up, and I'm like, oh, no, it's not. No, this doesn't have anything to do with that. And then I kept reading it, and it took me a second to realize what this was recontextualizing. And I'm like, this is good, but I'm not sure. This still seems pretty original. And then it was like, oh, but wait, Maria Jones is basically unused as a character, and we have so much richness. I mean, I understand there are exceptions. I feel like
this is Ryza as a whole getting characterization.
Something with Maria Jones once before. Like, I feel like I remember talking to him about it. Anyway, doesn't matter. I really like that these little, archive notes from her not only add more context to the thing within the universe of this document and her character, but it's also really, not even really sure. They're like fairly cool like idea prompts or referencing subtly things in one of his stories, like the rise of I'm just gonna read this little summary. The Rise of Vault is a support installation holding the vast majority of paper records after they were digitized into SkipNet, constructed in an underground cave that was hermetically and ontologically sealed with prototype deep well technologies. I submitted the project proposal to the council under the belief the cave was empty. I was mistaken. End of fucking paragraph. And we're done. And we move on. And it's like, woo, what's that?
And that is one of his SCPs. In fact, I think it's the one that comes right after this. And you're just like, wait, what? And so using the site dossier as a stinger for getting you to look at other things.
Yeah.
It's a great little
trick. Just like you said, it's very meta in a way that is not like pataphysics. But I really love that way that it folds in on itself like that. It's really great.
And of course, the graphics are really nice. You did a neat CSS theme. And of course, there's an absolutely thrillingly gorgeous icon for the site and an equally thrillingly gorgeous map for the site. I mean, you couldn't ask for a more higher quality site icon.
I don't know. I think they're kind of crap.
Fuck you. I spent some time on those.
I'm just kidding. No, I know.
For a moment, I thought this is I thought the map was a Rounded House original. I forget because I remember critiquing this. I also know that this is very similar to the version that I read. He didn't. I made a suggestion here and there. I don't think he took any of them.
Rounder House.
Classic Rounder House fashion.
Very, very classic.
All my suggestions were taken because they were all grammatical.
Yeah. But one of the things that I remember when I was talking to him about it is I'm essentially sitting like. I was approaching this more like it was a tale than an attempt at a site dossier until he's like, yeah, no, this is like, I think the way that he described to me is like, no, this is me trying to find a way to make a site dossier palpable. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're not doing like the normal tale things with like how I would describe like natural like conflict, it's one of these things where it's like, it's a really like interesting like biographic, and, like a really interesting set of lore. But that when I was doing the crit, that wasn't like how my head was spinning. But like, it's essentially a really interesting way to kind of do an info dump. It's a very effective way to do an info dump too, by essentially lacing this format with these notes, and a lot of it is how you break up the clinical tone with this like nice, more fluent voice. But the funniest part to me is still the fact that he even decided to still like to do a site dossier. And I think he because he in some ways he didn't need to. He didn't need to do it. He could have gotten this down in a tale. He could have gotten this down in a tale. He didn't need to do a site dossier. And I feel like the reason he's like, well, people have done site dossiers before, but in classic Rounded House fashion, I can just do it better.
Yep, that's him, all right. Yep.
I mean, that's the whole point of Gold and Jade proposal, right?
Right. Their names don't even match the formatting of the other names on the SCP-001 list. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, like, you don't get a site dossier that's not a format screw anymore, or you get it up to like +12 and it never goes any higher. Those are your options. They all have to do something clever because lists of statistics about a site is not interesting more than once, and it's not all that interesting once.
Yeah, it was so... Go ahead.
I was saying the only other one of note that I remember is the Site 64 dossier.
Oh, yeah.
But that is also because it doubled as an early hub for Conwell's in the Twisted Pines series.
Twisted Pines. And so it's got Twisted Pines, and it's got some Wilson stuff in it, and it's got Anderson robotic stuff. So of course it's got a little bit going for it, right?
Yeah, so it got that was the like the most popular site dossier until like 2017, 2018, something like. It probably actually was that number could probably be pushed a little later, but like until like the very recent trend of like not treating site dossiers as the old format, it was like that was what we had for like our star dossier.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
We like
how they are ranked these days. Go on.
No, but I mean, it was so frowned upon Do you remember when I was doing? I wanted to do a site dossier.
Yours is clever.
I wanted to do a site dossier so badly for the site I made up, all based on my series. In the sense of like, I just wanted to add more context to this. I wanted the site to be a character, and I was like, where would I find the organic way to talk about this in a tale? And then I torture myself over it because it was like people were like, don't do it, it's bad, people hate these, and I just turned it into the hub for the series.
Yeah, she posted it as a series hub, and it works that way. It's very clever.
And if you don't scroll down past the list of articles, you won't even know. And if you keep going, it's like, oh, there's a whole fucking site dossier here. Yeah, there is. And like, I just and I guess it's done all right. It's 117 for a tail hub.
That's fine.
Man, this isn't fair. The highest rated one is the goddamn Experiment Log 914 hub. That's not fair.
That doesn't count. That doesn't even count.
You know why I'm angry? I have the second highest one.
This is just like last episode. It's like, I want you to succeed, but I want you to succeed slightly less than me.
Well, the one below that is Harmony's. So.
Oh, yeah. Who? Anyway,
it's Conwell's. Conwell's is still the highest rated out of.
Conwell's is still doing pretty well. Yeah.
And then probably it's Cactus, and then probably Ralston. Yeah, cool. But still, there's been an explosion of these. There's 36 site dossiers now. There were like 10 or 11 when we started making.
Yeah. People were like
right.
actively telling me, you're just gonna ask for deletion by doing this,
right?
And it's like, ugh, but I want to do it. Anyway, but this is an excellent example, and it's worth reading even without reading the other articles. Although obviously go and read Rounder's other stuff, but I mean, I don't think we have to encourage anybody to do that.
No, don't read any of Rounder's articles. He can't. Don't feed his ego. He doesn't deserve it.
I think what we're meaning to say is fuck you, Rounder House. Anyway,
thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we've had him on twice, and we've said it right to his virtual face.
And I'll say it. I said it to his real face. I don't care.
But let's keep moving. So the next one is one I picked, and technically we did talk about it once before on the Davite episode, but I feel like this subject, like without talking about this article, is like a crime. So this was SCP-6140, which is the True Empire by Stormbreath and Ace Mallard, which is completely redefining, within context as well, in universe, SCP-140. And so this is, the reason I think this one stands out for me is not only the great twist of it, which we'll talk about in a second, but that this is actually set, when you first open it up, this is an article that is set that perfectly recognizes the importance of SCP-140, the concept of the Davites as existed prior to this writing, and continue to exist past this, and how serious and dark things are looking about, the follower, the Chronicle of the Devas is being used by the followers of, whatever, SCP-140A, or, different organizations that want to rewrite, the universe so that the Davite history is back to being part of Bayside reality. And it ends with this remarkably threatening, blinking light stating, alert, breach has begun, and all the Foundation are hiding themselves away in these reality bubble protected bunkers so that this won't affect them. And then I feel like you get one of the best left turns in recent years, because you open it up and it turns out that, well, yeah, the Davites were real, but we overthrew them centuries ago, and we're just a nation. Like, what nation didn't start off with a bunch of assholes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think this article in particular kind of does a really good job of encapsulating is when you're doing these like recontextualizations, there's this kind of dichotomy in a normal story of like how much setup versus payoff you like put in, like in terms of word count.
Sure.
Like in like you have your traditional story structure where you introduce a conflict, then you have rising action that builds up that conflict. Then you have your climax and your denouement, and it's kind of like your introduction and your rising action is like all set up, and then your climax and your denouement is all payoff. But with these kind of these recontextualization stories, a lot of what you can have some stories like kind of like Probe H9. Probe H9 this is a little less true for. There's some a little later that we'll get to that will make this a bit more concept more clear, but where your story is like 99% setup and then 1% payoff in terms of like word count. Like it's a big payoff. It feels impactful, but like your payoff is like a sentence at the end and that's it. And that justifies everything else. Whereas this and there's some other examples that I could come up with, but is more that there's actually less setup here than payoff in terms of just sheer word count. Like honestly, I like how it's written, but like if we really wanted to exacerbate the proportions, they could have like cut like a lot of the word count from the beginning. They shouldn't have. It's a great opening, but like they could have gotten the same amount of information across in like much less words, and probably struck like a 20% setup to 80% payoff, because the payoff the setup isn't really done in article. The setup is done by everyone reading everything else on the site. Right. And like
you know what the Davites are like. You know that they're a terrible empire of slave-keeping monsters, and you know they're going to be awful when they come back.
So like, exactly. So that's one of the things I find really interesting about like these kind of recontextualization or these articles that really build and leverage site lore, is that they can do something structurally that you can't really do with original material.
Yes, yeah. So much of this setup is based on what you know outside of this article. I mean, it acknowledges, like I said, like what I found this one so interesting being the fact that it's a recontextualization in universe. It's not just, a fun reference, but the reason it works so well is, like you said, it's all the stuff you already know, and then tossing that out the window.
Turns out that what SCP-140 was just Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, but SCP.
Yeah.
Right.
Some racist guy who thought
Orientalism.
Yeah, just thought, wouldn't it be cool if they were still the same way? It was so much better when they were like these interests. And he somehow learns how to make reality warping magic items and rewrites all of history to make the Davites be this weird. I mean, they were always bad, but the difference here is that he's constrained their entire history of their culture within this book, and none of the progress, none of the interesting like revolutions that happened, or the growing into the 20th century that happened all across the world in so many places that this could mimic. And the thing I think that works so well in this as well is the whole point of SCP-140A or 140 was to fuck around with the idea of like who writes history and how that affects our our ideas about the past. That's the core, one of the core ideas at the original article, and this one does that same thing in a completely different way. It's so fucking smart.
That's something that I love more than anything, is when you can write something that's a very clever commentary twist, and then having that existing and that being a coherent story that exists and achieves its thing, taking that and going, I can twist it again and make a new crazy clever twist, so that they both coexist and they're both great stories.
Yeah, I mean,
I think this is Stormbreath's favorite article. I'm pretty sure I've heard him say that.
I'm not surprised at all.
That doesn't surprise me at all. It's
incredible.
This is very Stormbreath too. Like I know it was a collaboration between Stormbreath and Ace Mallard, but like this reeks of a Stormbreath article.
Totally. Yeah.
We can smell you on it.
And what's funny is it does so much legwork, and it's really not very long.
It's very tight. It's very tightly written. I was expecting like I saw turn page, and I knew generally what the article did, because like I talked to Stormbreath, even though like I before I had read this, I had just seen people kind of chat about it. I knew approximately what I was going to do, but to see that it was only one additional page, I'm like, oh, that's restraint right there.
Yeah, because he could have. I mean, they both could have done this crazy. I mean, it's enough narrative potential. It's rich, the world of the Deva and fucking with that concept could have gone. This could have been another 6001. It could, it could have gone as deep and as long as that one, and instead it was like, no, we're good. The whole point is to pull the rug out from beneath you, reestablish a new status quo, and realize, yeah, this was always the way it was. And
I really love that.
That's so good. And
as an historian, I am like a huge fan of the way it plays as a commentary on ethnographers freezing a culture at a certain point in their history, and everybody assuming that they've always been like that forever, and coloring them that way and acting towards them that way, and how it affects the way people are perceived. And it's just a giant metaphor for that, and it's so good.
Even going back to like some of the first, fucking Herodotus, or some of the other early history books that were, you think that shit was accurate? Like, no, it was always there was always bias there, and guess what? There always is bias.
Yep.
It's not as obvious now, maybe.
Now we train people to at least acknowledge the fact that you have a bias when you are writing this.
Right. And just, it's so fucking smart. It's just so fucking smart. And, and it's just, and Davites are one of my favorite things. Not shocking. I mean, I did the Davite Hub. I've written a lot about them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. The only Parawatch I've ever done is about the Davites. And this completely, this is entirely against my headcanon. And I'm reading through the comments because I left a comment on this even though I never did during the contest, which is surprising. And there's so many people that are like, ugh, I don't like the way that this played out. And it's like, for the same reason that I love it. Like, this completely blows my headcanon. I mean, and in fact, contradicts everything I know about the Deva and why I continue to write about them. But I don't care because it's so fucking well done and ballsy. It's just the most fucking cool ass, like, it's just such a, like, watch me go.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think Stormbreath headcanons it either. Like, I don't think it's supposed to be canon. It's supposed to be its own thing, and like there should definitely be follow-ups to it, but it's not meant to be a replacement. It's meant to be its own statement.
Sure. And the people that think that isn't already, like, people were asking me when I was writing the Davite Hub, how are you going to fit in 6140? I'm like, don't you already understand that this has already happened? The Trash Fire completely redefines the Davites. Entirely. No. Yeah, they do. It does. Entirely. And before that, the concept of them, the Scarlet King proposal, which I think that's, if not the first time, then one of the more famous earlier concepts where, like, the children of the Scarlet King are tied to, like, concepts with the Deva. And it's like, yeah, but that was never the point. Go read 140. Never the point. And the most famous Davite articles have nothing to do with the Scarlet King. But that's something that people constantly, isn't that the case? Well, yeah. So, I mean, this fits perfectly. 140 sets up in the established idea, anything could still be canon within and totally coexist with the original purpose of 140 because of the way 140 works.
Right. It rewrites reality.
Yeah, so good. Anyway. What a perfect, I could not have not picked this one because it's it perfectly, like, sums up the point of this subject of recontextualizing something, because it did it with such love and reverence for the original stuff by aiming at the same themes and hitting the same, concept of rewriting history, and then but all the details are like, but everything is bullshit. It's so good.
6Con was a hell of a good contest.
Yeah.
It was a good contest.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey there, fans of Simply Creative People. We're mostly unsponsored so far, so I figured I would take the time to mention that you can support the show on the show page at anchor.fm/simplycreativepeople, or if you're so inclined, you can check out Harry or my Ko-Fi pages at ko-fi.com/harryblink or /Grigori Carpin author. Things are crazy tough out there, so if you can't afford any financial support, and trust me, we understand, do us a favor and mention the podcast to someone who might enjoy it, or spread the word online. If we want to bridge the gap between fans and creators, we've got to get the word out to new fans. In many ways, this show is designed to be appealing to new and old fans of SCP alike, as we can all enjoy some discussion about this thing we love, and we can all learn something new. Heaven knows I learn something new every week. Thanks so much, and we love you just for listening. Thanks for the support through all these first few months of the podcast. You're the best.
Apple a Day, which is by Ip. Harry, you picked this one.
Yeah. So this is an episode in Ip's SNC Plastics canon ongoing Sweeps Week series of Halloween stories called Black Autumn. He did one called Black Autumn, did one called Black Autumn 2, Rise of the Pit Sloth, I think it's called. And this is Black Autumn 3,
which like an anthology series.
Was an anthology series. And he considers it unfinished. It just sort of stops. But the premise of this one is that there are horrible things happening related to apples, and these apples are going out to all of the different nexuses, the known zones of anomalous locations and anomalous phenomenon in the Foundation verse. So he wrote one tale in each of these nexuses. I think there's one or two maybe written by other people, but it's an anthology of these stories taking place in these other locations. And this one is used to recontextualize one of the edgelordiest, goofy fucking SCPs ever written, which is SCP-353, which is a woman named Vector who dresses like a goth and has control over like bacteria and viruses and is a super edgelordy person who wants to like infect people and kill them. And
this is like 2008. I want to write the X-Men, but edgy.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yep. She's an X-Men character. This is somebody who would be definitely going to Xavier's school. And that is almost kind of what happens in this story, because one of the last notes in SCP-353 is they're sending it to Dr. Simon Glass, who's one of the old senior staff characters, the psychologist of, I think, Site-19, who is one of the less often used ones. And this article is about how Dr. Glass met SCP-353. And this does that thing that Grigori loves so much, where it bounces back and forth between the past and the future, where we see her meeting Dr. Glass, and she's characterized the way she's characterized by that article. And then we see how their relationship has changed over the years and how she's developed into an actual human being character and moved beyond the ridiculous edgelordiness and has become a person who actually behaves like a person and has a personality. And it plays off their personalities, their two personalities and their relationships, and also other characters as well. And it's a great big way of taking an article and not saying the article didn't happen the way it's written, but saying the article as it was written didn't get the full picture, and we looked at these people and they changed and they behaved like actual people. He's done this a few times. The Pumpkin SCP ends up being one of his Black Autumn things. It's the premise of an entire Black Autumn episode. Somewhere in the 80s. I can't remember which one it is. But this is a real case of taking something that, and I don't mean like any disrespect to the author. This is an old SCP, like this is one of the original ones. It's so incredibly old, and I don't even know anything else this author has written. It's so of a piece with the most forgettable of the old ones because it's just ridiculous edgelord character. And I wouldn't have necessarily looked at that article and thought it particularly deserved being extrapolated on. But this tale, it makes that article's existence worthwhile, really.
Yeah, the thing I really like about it, like you said, is that it doesn't negate the original article. And in fact, it asks that question of like, maybe someone is acting like a toxic edgelord asshole character in that article because she's just so fucking hurt. Because so many bad things have happened to her because of this anomaly and because of being contained. And how would you even react to that? Probably not well. And how many walls would you put up? And watching her slowly break out of that it never gets. I'm not even sure what the right word. It's not sappy, but it's
not melodramatic.
Yeah, it's not melodramatic, and it's not sappy. It doesn't feel like a Hallmark special, but it's really, really touching, especially by the end.
This is because like a human being reaches out and they reach out back and forth and they actually like get a relationship going where they mean something in a sentence to each other. And then you like the last lines of the SCP say like her disregard for human. This is Dr. Glass, the character who actually reaches out in this tale, says her disregard for human life signals towards extreme malignant narcissism and psychopathic tendencies. Her obvious pleasure in manipulating and controlling diseases within herself, despite the often painful symptoms involved, are also quite troubling. And he's like, maybe we can give her psychological examination, so make her just less difficult for us to deal with. And then the version like that psychologist sounds like an asshole. He's basically, oh, she's a psychopath. And Ip's basic entire approach to this article is to go, well, that doesn't actually fit with most characterization of Glass. What if Glass isn't a psychopath? What if he's trying to be a good psychologist and just be a good psychologist to this woman? And the answer is she stops being a fucking monster. It's in a sense, it's kind of similar to we were just talking about Yet Another Murder Monster by Pepper's Ghost.
Yeah, I was
maybe
just going to say.
Stop treating these things like they're monsters. Maybe some of them won't be monsters. Not all of them, but some of them.
I mean, 6001 hits that a few times too.
Right.
I mean,
173 out in the public square.
Yeah. 682.
6001 didn't come up somehow. That one recontextualizes everything.
That's true. I didn't even get suggested. That's funny. But, you know.
Well, it's not like it needs it either.
It's doing all right. It's doing all right.
It's doing fine. It's doing fine. One of the things that I also find interesting about it kind of also like kind of is iconic of type of recontextualization, which is just a straight up character study.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Like that's what this is. This is just on its face a character study, a very, very good character study.
Yeah.
But like when you have so many characters on the site, which it tells you a lot about the number of ways you can kind of recontextualize and reimagine that. It effectively took this long for us to hit a character study.
Yes.
But like,
it's funny.
A lot of the time when people are rewriting old characters, they're either like using them for their own like ends and means, like, oh, I think this is really a fun character to introduce to this plot, or as there's a lot of different iterations of, there are character studies of the individual characters themselves. Like a lot of people, when they write their cleft tale, as was discussed in the beginning of the podcast, not everyone does it, but a lot of people end up writing a cleft character study because one of the interesting things about writing clef is showing that you're doing something different, and oftentimes that different thing is worth investigating in and of itself. Again, not literally everyone.
Sure.
The clef tale we have on the docket today doesn't do that, but there's a lot of examples of it.
Right. The one we have today tries to see if you can use the clef as he's been portrayed in a story that is serious.
Exactly. So this, what was fascinating to me about this is that this is a character study for a character that like
no one cared about.
No one thought about until
totally didn't,
I forgot that this was an SCP. Exactly.
Right.
Like there's nothing.
I never knew it existed before I read through Black Autumn. Like,
and in some ways, I think that's what makes it so prime for it.
Yeah.
The fact that there's so little there means you can do so much.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it's the same way that like Marvel or DC Comics, you know, like by the 80s and 90s were writing, you know, really incredible like character stuff. And you're like, yeah, but that's because like Batman back in the day had like nothing. There was nothing. He just put on a mask and like drove a car around and beat up bad guys. Like there wasn't anything there. You could do so much more with something that's that thin.
Exactly.
I just had a thought, and this is Ip. He's got a tale that does the same thing with Dr. Clef, and I'm not going to say what the name of it is because that'll spoil it. I'd rather people just see it, even though he tries to hide this tale. He's got a tale where it's Dr. Clef and he's there the whole time, and you don't know it's him until the very end, and it's like an amazing twist.
That's the one that you were like
Clef is
recommending
the one I was forced to read.
Yeah.
He doesn't like Dr. Clef's character. He doesn't like that character. So he kind of hate wrote a thing where he used the character in a way he thought was clever. He also did something like that with Dr. King, where Dr. King metaphysically transforms everything he touches into the concept of apple seeds.
Yeah, that's right.
And it works kind of like the inside SCP. But it just occurred to me, like, that's why this was written. He must hate SCP-353.
Yeah, probably.
I just opened the ratings and I scrolled down, and yep, there's his downvote.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
But it wasn't like a case of going like, I hate this, I'm gonna shit on it. It was a case of, I don't like this, but there's something I could do with it.
That's what's so interesting about this subject of recontextualization, is that just as often, or probably close to just as often, as an author will say, oh, that was really cool, I could use it in this way, is probably people saying, I fucking hate that. Can I use it in a different way? Yeah, exactly. That's stupid. Yeah. Or that's shit. Let me redefine it. Like the next one we're going to talk about, and it's just like, that's horrible. I need to redefine this entirely. Or, like I said, that's so cool. I want to use the toy. It's so funny that there's no other subject where that would have come up, where it was like, this could be inspired as much by your disdain for the original as it could be for your love for it.
I think that's happened to Ralston about 20 different times.
Oh, sure.
That sounds right.
I hate this. I'm going to do my own version.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Coming back to like that question at the beginning, like how do you go about like writing a recontextualization? This reminds me of there was a clip. I don't remember the name of the author who was giving this advice. Like someone was essentially giving writing advice on like how they get inspired, and their response was reading good fiction is one good way to get inspired. But you know what's even better? Reading bad fiction and feeling spiteful.
Yeah, honestly, I mean like reading trash but entertaining fiction is really good. Like pulpy shit. Reading bad stuff, like Harry, you were talking about, Grant Morrison and the way that you treat it a lot of times. I'm sure Grant Morrison doesn't look at the early 50s DC stuff and think it's crap, but like I do. And but then I look at almost not every, but almost everything that I've read by Grant Morrison and go, God, what a fucking genius. Right. Not always good at landing a story or closing the gap, but in general, the journey is always worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so I think this is, I don't know if this is where I started rearranging things, but I thought next we could talk about Fear Alone by DJ Cactus, which Kirby picked.
I had one that I suggested that you had between on the outline, but I'm suggesting we drop that one and just push it to like a rewrites episode.
You sure?
Yeah, because we've been talking for an hour and a half, and we're like halfway through the list, so I think we'll just lose that one.
Okay. All right, great. So yeah, we'll drop that one. Sorry to the author, but we will.
Well, don't tell them. Don't tell.
I didn't say who it was, but we'll do like just a straight up rewrite episode, and that'll give me an excuse to do the rewrite of 166. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Kirby, take it away. What is Fear Alone?
All right, Fear Alone. So one
other than my life story. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So
that's the cruelest laugh I've ever heard.
Kirby was like, "Good, you should be alone." I'm not alone. My girlfriend. I'm not alone. My girlfriend loves the show. Thank you. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
So essentially,
she lives in Canada.
She does not live in Canada.
Oh no! Is Harry banging your girlfriend?
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
Now I'm done.
This came out on air. This is too twisted.
Anyways, well, speaking of twisted, any of you read this SCP-231?
No, never heard of it.
Good old SCP-231, everybody's favorite SCP.
So 231
I'm
is,
sorry. I love Clef and a lot of things he's written. I fucking hate 231.
Yeah.
Very few people like.
It makes me genuinely mad.
It's a red flag.
231 does exactly one thing incredibly well, and that is be visceral. No one enjoys it, but there is no one who I know who does not have incredibly strong emotions towards 231.
Sure.
It does produces a reaction.
I'm not even going to describe why that's so.
Good idea.
You should just know. Anyways, Cactus is also someone who really doesn't like 231.
Clearly, from this,
we have any younger listeners. Don't read 231.
No,
it's not for you.
Yeah.
Good call. But Fear Alone essentially is an attempt to take 231 and just say, no, everything is fine. How dare you? How dare you think that everything is actually fine? And it does it in a way that is kind of reminiscent of, when I say it does it in this way, I mean like the structure and kind of the bluntness of it is similar to 61440. the Deva article
sure,
we discussed
yeah,
earlier.
I can see that.
In that, like, what it does is that it sets you up to be like, remember, this is how things are currently established to be, and then in the back half, in the payoff, it's, no, that is actually not even close to correct, and here is why. And essentially, like, both of these articles, by having this bluntness, have this like kind of funny property of being a little expository, but it works out really well because your setup builds up so much tension, and the explanation just relieves all of it.
Yeah. I mean, this is another one that, just like 6140, requires on you kind of knowing. And yes, Fear Alone does explain what the problem is with 231, but you know, if it didn't exist already, if it wasn't already a controversial thing,
there'd be no way to
there would be nothing to this. But yeah, it does a really good job. I do respect the impetus to try and mitigate the horribleness that is 231. I'd rather just 231 vanish.
Yeah, because like this is the kind of thing where it's almost an inside joke. It's like the Keter duty thing. It's like a device that has appeared in 50 different tales on the SCP Wiki, where people who really suck at their job get sent to monitor the 231, the 110 Montauk procedure. Like it's a thing that's threaded through the site. And of course, all of the tales that are written that take this thing as a real serious thing that happens exactly as it's described or not described or sideways described in the article are unreadably unpleasant. And I've of course had to read a few of them as part of our initiative for cataloging all the tales. And yeah, the ones that take this completely seriously and describe it,
No.
Let me just ask anyone that wrote one of those, why?
Why?
And I'm not curious. That's a judgmental why.
Yes, that was a.
Could you just go and delete it for our sake?
Yeah, really.
This is just a public service announcement. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Anyways, Fear Alone's really good at like it's really good at essentially taking an article that is like really, really difficult and making its existence more palpable. Even if you would rather that it's gone.
Yeah.
This
totally.
lets you just feel a little better about it. And I think that's something that like that it's very impressive given how viscerally people react to 231 originally.
Yeah, I can certainly understand the impetus to write a story that just says no really loud. Like, I've written one or two of those myself where I just go, no.
No.
Yeah. No, and it does a good job. It doesn't it's not short, but it doesn't stick around too long.
We all know he needs an editor.
Well, I didn't say it.
It's my job to just throw out violent quips like that. Seriously, like I can say that. Do I not need an editor? I've got more words than anybody else.
As the person that has probably most often been like, you gotta cut something.
You're the only one brave enough to do it, and you're always right, but I never do it.
You have before, but it's not.
I do that to Rounder so much. Actually, the person I did that the most to is Dark Stuff. When I used to cut Dark Stuff's work, I would always suggest he cut like 30% of it, and he wouldn't. And then he'd come back to me like, yeah, I could have done it. And I'm like, and you should have.
I remember when
Dark
we wrote
Stuff's good, but
6500.
he always,
Because like the first four paths were me, Grigori, Dark Stuff, and Ip, and ours are all 10,000 words long, and his is 13,000.
And they were supposed to be. 5,000
like
words.
5,000 words.
We were like, and I was the one that said this, and I don't really like. I have written long things, but most of my things kind of go about 4,000 to 5,000 words at most. And I was like, listen, like we had these very intense discussions. As you can imagine, we wrote a novel in 6 weeks. People like, wait, we didn't discuss that. Yeah, wait a minute. That's not the way we're supposed to do it. Nobody was mad. We're all friends. But, it's a lot of tension, a lot of pressure. And we were all like, hey, this is going to get us laughed off the wiki. No one's ever going to read this. And I was like so insistent. It has to be limited. We can only, this is already, if all of us only spend 4,000 words, it's still going to be like 30,000 words. We can't do it. We can't go more than that. And all of us, including me, came back with at least 10,000 words. And then Dark Stuff came back with 13,000.
I was so mad when he came up with the 13,000 because I had to work so hard. I took a knife to my part more than anything else I've ever written to try to get it down to 10,000 words. And then Dark Stuff was like, here's 13,000 words. God damn it. And then, of course, it comes out and half of the readers go, I really love Dark Stuff's part. God damn it. Yes, I do too.
Oh, yeah. That was the worst part, was that I was like, I want you to cut. And I don't know which part, though, because it's all good.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here cackling because you're all like 10,000 words, like 10,000 words is long, but 4,000 to 5,000 words like medium length. And I'm sitting here and I'm like 5,000 is like some of my longest SCPs on the site.
Well, I used to think about it that way too, but you know.
The problem is that each one of the things we were writing was meant to be a complete adventure story that was like going somewhere, and then they all ended up being immense,
huge. And it was so funny is that I've actually had some crit like after the fact on Cleric, which is that first part of mine, where it's like, well, this feels like, it's like the pace, it's good, but the pace is like blistering. And I'm like, you don't even know, man. It could have been 15,000 words. And it's like, listen, we were already asking so much of people. And I can't believe how many people have read it. It's at like 730 almost.
Yeah, it's way.
And it's 96,000 words. It's crazy. It's almost as high as 6140. And it's 200 times the length. It's stupid. It's amazing. I'll never be not amazed that people have loved it. Anyway, sorry.
You know what else has a very similar score to 6,500?
What?
SCP-6820.
Oh, that's true, which we are going to talk about. So yeah, that's the next one. I have taken so many notes, and we can't do it. We can't just like break down this whole article.
Well, the thing is, we're going to do an admonition thing.
Well, if they fit it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we are, and that was my comment. I left a comment on this, which I hadn't the first time I read it, and I came back, and so often when we are covering stuff that I've already read, I will skim so that I refamiliarize. This one I just read cover to cover again. And I don't even like the super technical, like my SCPs are never super technical, you know, and even the ones that are, I need help with it. Like I'm just not the way, you know, I went to law school. It's not, we don't write science technical stuff. You know, we write technical stuff, but that's different.
And this one is technical porn.
Yeah, it is. And it's not boring even once.
Because it's so
there's so many moments where you're like, oh, I get it, that's 682. Oh wait, no, that's 682. Oh,
you remember the context behind this one? What caused this one to be existed?
I remember having the conversation, but I'm not refresh my memory.
I'll just throw it out here because I was there, Gandalf. We were all there, all of us were there. This was in MemeCon 2021.
Oh right, yeah.
So this was written for a contest that I think made half the people who heard it announced irritated, where it was to base an SCP on a meme and enter it in a contest. And of course, MemeCon, being such a ridiculously bad idea, generated like a dozen absolute banger amazing articles because fucking SCP people are weird. And this is by placeholder McD, SCP-6280 termination attempt.
Well, it's also by Liren
and
Steph
by
Lynch.
Liren, and also by Steph Lynch.
Yep.
I believe Liren probably would have done some of the words, but I think primarily would have been punching up the CSS, and the renders, the absolutely phenomenal renders, are by Steph Lynch.
So nuts! They just keep getting better.
They're so good. That's one of the cardinal elements of the Admonition series.
I remember him
off of this.
Place sending me a DM of the moving diagram, and I was like, "What the fuck are you writing? This is amazing!"
And the fact that this is all attached, I vectorized one of his diagrams, so I'm involved in this too.
Oh wow!
I appear in people's image credits very frequently as additional image by Harry Blank, just chiming in there because people know that if they ask me to do something, I will feel guilty and I will help them with it. Oh, I made the Drigioni secondary class icon too. Yeah, look at me. I'm a co-author as well.
Woo.
But recontextualizing. We're talking about recontextualizing. Not only the way this article recontextualizes 682, this was a recontextualization of the prompt of the contest, because the prompt was take a meme and make an SCP, and he took a meme of the SCP Wiki, which is we're always trying to decommission SCP-682.
Yeah.
That's a meme on the site. That's
Right.
a thing that appears everywhere. And he basically went, well, what if it's almost a memetic problem where the Foundation is just so intensely needing to decommission this fucking thing?
And what's so fascinating is that isn't even the meat. The meat is the
No.
blowback. The meat is what happens after. Because we never, this article never clearly states what its business is, but unless you're dumb, you get it. Especially with the footnotes. God, the footnotes are so good. Because I say footnotes, but like most of them are just one word.
They're fucking color commentary
Yeah.
from
the
SCP-682.
So this is obviously a reinterpretation of the hard to kill or the hard to destroy reptile 682 by Dr. Gears. And it's, this insane weapon that's going to rewrite reality, because there's this thing, which we never clearly find out what it is because this weapon worked too well, that we have to destroy. Something that is part of the human, brain concept. It seems like maybe it was an alien concept that got into the noosphere, but this is a thing where for 40 years the Foundation has been trying to destroy it and couldn't figure it out until finally Dr. Gears and Placeholder McD and a couple other people think, well, what if we did this thing that literally plunges itself into the noosphere and erases it from the consciousness, in the universe. Very Placeholder McD idea.
This is almost the origin of a Placeholder McD idea. Like his first article, Integer, is very, very crazy shit. But this article, I think, just changed his whole trajectory.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, was admonition
increasingly in crazy?
I don't
shit
think. Because admonition wasn't really a thing yet, right?
No, admonition. The entire series of crazy shit came out of this article, and also our Rise No Canon article in a sort of distant past.
Right.
So I will say one thing. I remember this article coming out because I remember it in context. Because correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty confident about this. I believe this came out after Placeholder's 001 proposal.
It did. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Which I'm one of the few people who I have a very difficult time reading Placeholder articles because I read slowly, and so the way that his use of language is something that to me is inherently a barrier. I understand why people like it. I just can't with it most of the time.
It's hard. Sometimes his stuff is challenging.
This is a known thing.
Yeah.
It isn't that it's not, that I can't understand it. It's just that it takes the number. It takes a long time for a Placeholder article to get going in terms of sheer word count for me, because he has a lot of words to do the technical jargon, and that tends to be towards the top because that's how an SCP is formulated, right?
The dense stuff goes at the top. Yep.
The dense stuff goes at the top, and then usually from there, at least for me, I'm already in fatigue mode, and so the rest of it is me trying to play catch up. But I remember essentially this felt like a very Placeholder article already, because I remember his 001 was like this, but not as refined or targeted in any way.
He did it really early. His 001 was one of his.
His 001 was one of his early articles.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Was, trying to recontextualize a bunch of different 001s.
I really love
the idea of an 001.
But I get why people find it.
I don't.
It's okay.
I have a long comment on it, and that's okay.
It's known to be polarizing.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Too, but it's known to
but
be I really like it.
With this, one of the things that I think is fascinating to me about this, at least, is that So at least for me, to me, it was very clear what it was and where it was going for at least a while. There's the very last twist at the very last drop down I didn't see coming, but everything else I more or less saw. Maybe not the exact method of it, but what I appreciate about it still is that after about the halfway point, it does just start hitting the beats of the original 682
Yes.
article.
Yeah.
And depending on if we're still doing the next article in the outline. Okay. So then I'll start this now. So to me, this is a good example of a when you think about an SCP, there's a lot of ways you can recontextualize an SCP. There is the what of an SCP, the how of an SCP, and the why of an SCP. You could also do the who, but that's just doing a character setting. We already described that earlier. So like this to me is a really good encapsulation of the what of an SCP. Like I'm not going to like the way that I want to recontextualize and rethink about 682 is what is 682? And this just provides an entirely different answer.
What I like about it is that's totally true. I totally agree with you. What I really love about it is this is them. You could easily read this as the thing that they were trying so hard to get rid of that caused so much problems was actually 682 the way we understand it. And then the thing that they made effectively took its place. You know, like it's not literally, it's not another lizard, but it behaves in the same, and you could read it that way, you could read it, you could not read it that way, and it works perfectly well. But it's just so, like, when I remember when I was first reading it, and I was like, okay, I get it, this is 682, this is 682. And like you said, there's that part kind of about halfway down where you're like, oh, no, this is 682. Just from a wildly different perspective.
Like the thing about how it adapts to all the shit you throw at it, just like Doomsday and DC Comics, where it's impossible to destroy because every time you try to destroy it, it figures out a way around it and becomes stronger. They came up with these crazy eigenweapon, nonsensical ideas to just like, they created an ascended termination attempt, which ends up being the theme of Admonition as they try to create these absolutely ascended mad scientist concepts that always go wrong. And its response was to ascend in a survival sense. It just became
full-on apotheosis.
So much worse.
Which is hilarious because the whole point in the original, not the original article, but like at the beginning, is this thing that they wanted to destroy was so pervasive and so impossible to destroy because it was part of the noosphere. And effectively what they did in trying to get rid of this thing that was that they were losing control of was to then make that part of the noosphere to the point where it is not just rewriting reality, but like, no, this is, and I don't mean God in any sort, but like this is that everything's different now, and it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
I love this one for so many reasons. God, the last drop down is so well done.
Imagine going that hard for MemeCon.
I know.
I mean, that is the most quintessentially SCP thing.
Yeah, that's the thing that I always try to do. Is the stupider the prompt I get, the more I try to like compensate by going hard.
Do you remember how angry we were about the 6,000 contest being in nature? And we wrote a novel.
When the 6,000 contest dropped and the theme was nature, I immediately messaged placeholder and said something like, "Don't quit the wiki." And his immediate response in all caps was, "I'm mad about nature."
I mean, look at how like pissed I was about luck for 7,000. And
I think I was the only person who was so happy.
Well,
about
you
luck.
had
I was like, "Oh, I have a great idea right on the top of my head."
you
thanks to it, partially. And I won. I was all right.
That was.
I would not have even had an entry if Sumerian had not thrown an idea at me in Bavarian. Like, and then it was like, "Oh!" And then we just went that.
Yeah. I think it's very, very SCP to take a silly prompt and do something obnoxiously serious with it. Like as we see with the 7,000 cons, with MemeCon, cliche cons are another good example of this. Just for me personally, I was for a gift exchange piece, Uranium Empire asked for someone to write a story of her character having the happiest day of her life. And I'm just gonna read my first sentence from.
Read the first line of it.
I'm just gonna read the first. Yeah, I'm just gonna read the first line of it. I have to pull it up real quick because I did not have this on.
And just to be clear for context, everyone, after this first line, he's put a whole bunch of code that makes it look like the page is done and there's no more text on it. You have to scroll way down to see that there's any more. It looks like the whole thing the first time you load this page.
Yeah. So I decided to, very content warning. I decided to open this tale with the best day of Sarah Yarkoni's life was the day when she finally grew a pair and hung herself from a ceiling fan.
Oh my god.
And Oh my god, when Yui saw it, they were just mind blown. They're like, what?
I was so happy, because I was so happy when I had the idea for this, but like that's what I mean. That's like very quintessentially SCP.
Mm-hmm.
Like ask for this very light, fluffy, fun thing, and no, I'm going to immediately make you question why you asked for this.
And then, of course, you scroll down and it just becomes this massive, amazing, sprawling thing with all this effort thrown in. But for the start, you just shock the fuck out of the reader.
Good opening lines, man.
Through. I'm very happy with that. That's probably my best opening sentence I've ever read.
Very good.
There's a few
it's very good.
Here, yeah.
That's like the opening of the Gunslinger or something like that. Or fucking Moby Dick. Like, wow, that's a line. What happens now?
In a hole in the ground, there was Sarah Yurkani, who finally grew a pair and hung herself from a ceiling lamp.
Eugene 11/8 time. Read and find out how that ship turns itself around.
It's what we call a hook.
Always be plugging.
All right.
Speaking of always be plugging,
yeah,
we got another article by Captain Kirby.
Yeah, let's move on because we are at 2 hours.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, so this one is in. I wanted to bring up after I saw, because I'd already recommended some articles, and then I saw that 6820 got recommended. I'm like, okay, if we're doing this kind of a 682 article, I wanted to kind of bring this up as like an interesting contrast, because 682 recontextualizations are kind of like the clef recontextualizations for an SCP writer.
Yeah.
Again, if you write for the site long enough, you will eventually do your own 682 thing. Yeah. And so this was mine. It was in it was impossible to destroy reptile, which is just, what if you put the lizard in the end of death hub, which is my I say it's my hub. I started it during a contest where it's a whole bunch of other people and I collaborated on the start. I'm just kind of the person who kept up with it the longest.
That's the way it always works, though.
Did a lot of the curations.
Always.
Exactly, but I always feel bad saying it's mine. Because it's like it's shorthand, and it's shorthand is not inaccurate, but it's also not accurate. Anyways, the short version of the tale is, in a world where no one can die, it turns out 682 is still a lizard. It also can't die. So why even keep trying to kill it? So the Foundation stops.
Yeah.
And you know what that makes the lizard?
Sad. He's just sad now.
I wanted to bring up the fact that, and I already covered this earlier, but this and the next 2 are all canon entries where it's like, how can we use this setting to put this character or concept or story into just a different perspective? It's not even, hey, let's rewrite, let's not even reinterpret. It's listen, the basic premise of the SCP universe is now this. So how does it affect that?
Exactly.
And which is why I think canons work so well. I think it's why they're so, not even popular, but why so many writers like writing for them or creating them. Because it's just like, well, how can I put a whole twist on the whole fucking universe?
Exactly.
And we will do canons, and we will do End of Death, and I'm sure we would have you back.
For sure.
Because
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to switch to canons, and it would be silly not to have people that actually write for canon.
This one has a particular energy too, because this is a kind of tale that because again, I've read an absurd number of tales because of our collections initiative that's somewhat stalled in recent years, but it's a specific kind of tale where you take a concept that you're interested in and you've got an idea in your head that's unique, that's related to something that already exists, and you go, I'm going to execute this fairly quickly to show everybody this clever thought that I had. And it doesn't overstay its welcome. It isn't full of packing and filler and all that. It goes, wouldn't it be crazy if this monster that can't be destroyed just didn't matter anymore because everybody can't be destroyed?
Right.
Wouldn't that suck for the monster even? He's not unique anymore. Nobody cares, buddy.
This is sort of
you just got in, got out. You did the job, and it works perfectly.
Yours and Lizard Wizards thing in No Return. Trip down memory lane is very much that.
Yeah, we did the thing where 173 gets turned into gravel lining Site 19's path. I'm quite proud of that one. That worked really well. That was all Liz
was
Wiz's idea, and we executed in like 2 hours. It was amazing.
it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these are like ideas that you have and you write in the night and you post in the morning. Yeah, and it's just nice when they come together. But one of the things that I also think is really interesting in context of 6820, I mentioned 6820 recontextualizes the what of 682. This to me is a nice example to talk about something that recontextualizes the how of an SCP. How is 682 an end of death? Well, 682 is sad at end of death.
Well, of course,
I love making those sad.
Of course, it's sad. It can't even do what it wants. Even if it was to get out, now it can't do what it wants.
It can't kill people.
It can't even
just
kill people.
Smash them, but it can't really kill them.
I mean, I think it would still be pretty entertaining, but
the Asmodeus stuff in the canon Renaissance comic brought up in the previous episode. What would 682 be like in Unfounded?
No offense to you, Kirby, or to Place. That's probably my favorite recontextualization of 682. I fucking love Asmodeus. That shit was awesome.
For what it's worth, I think Unfounded has some of writing a good Unfounded tale has a very high ceiling on the site. There's the one about the witch the witch child. That's still one of my all-time favorites. You can do so much in Unfounded. The problem is that it's such a difficult concept to correctly write for, but if you pull off something Unfounded well, then usually it's a banger.
Right.
But I'm not trying to cut off conversation. Your tale's very good. It certainly plays with the expectations. But I do want to rush us through these last three.
Our last three plugs of ourselves, essentially.
Which is good, because we're talking about ourselves. So, right. Harry, the one you picked for yourself was Such a Shame It Didn't Work, which is redefining who?
Dr. Dan Redacted.
From SCP-096.
From SCP-096. So, the Canon Renaissance contest that we brought up a bunch of times, because it was my first contest. Maybe it was even Grigori's first contest.
Yep.
Did you participate in one before that? Yeah.
Nope.
We were on two. The premise was to take a canon that has stagnated or has not been updated recently and to write something in that canon. And Grigori and I ended up on two separate teams. Although we were friends at the time already, we ended up on two separate teams, both writing about the Resurrection canon, which was essentially the Foundation decides to get anomalies back out into the field as a mobile task force.
And we took very different...
Completely different paths.
Yeah. Not even we weren't cheating. We were not trying to
No,
we were really not telling much.
Collude.
Yeah, it was interesting.
We wrote two stories that could work together at the same time perfectly well.
They do.
And then they do. And we later combined them.
Yeah.
Because Grigori's team made a new team of Alpha 9 Last Hope to go off and fight a threat. And what we did was we instead showed a new threat appearing in the universe, which was General Bo taking over Site 19 and dumping all their anomalies out in the world to try to break the veil, and how that was dealt with. And while my friends, my co-authors were working on their parts, we all wrote completely separately from each other. We had very little coordination in this, and I think it shows to a certain extent. But I was sitting there going, well, I read all this Resurrection stuff, and there's a lot of use of old author avatars. Is there some old author avatar, or is there an old character in something that I really like that I would pick up and stick in here? Because I can't grab my characters and stick them in here. I've only been writing for a few months. Nobody wants to read that, even though I ended up doing that in a later tale in the series anyway, because fuck you, I do what I want. And what I was thinking was, did any characters strike me from when I was reading Series 1? And the answer is, of course, basically no, because the Foundation characters are mostly cold and cruel. Not cold but not cruel, but cold and cruel. They're just boring. But Dr. Dan in 096, who is the author avatar of the author of 096, Dr. Dan, did interest me, because, spoiler alert for article everybody's either read or has seen the video of, he is so convinced that SCP is such a piece of shit and will eventually cause the human race to go extinct that he intentionally stages a containment breach to let it out and kill a whole bunch of people and then catch it in a controlled situation so he can point to that and go, let me kill that fucking thing before it kills the human race. But they catch him. And at the end of the 096 incident article, it's directly stated that he'll be allowed to decommission it, but he will also be executed for his treason against the Foundation. Cool. I thought that was interesting, because a guy who's got a principle, who makes a moral stand that also is objectively an abhorrent way of making the moral stand, but he's right, but he's wrong, but he's right. Because it is like, this is the SCP where you look at a picture, it comes to kill you, put that on social media, put it on Facebook, put it on the front page of Twitter, whole planet's dead. Because this thing can't be killed and it runs really fast. So he was right, but the way he did it got a lot of people killed, so he's a morally great character. So I sat there thinking, is there a way I could just make him still be alive and use him as the character who deals with this anomalous breakout? So I went, what if he's been writing up decommissioning procedures for 96 this whole time, all these years in detention, and submitting them, and they keep going, well, thanks for that, but we don't think this one will work. Why don't you try writing another, and another, and another? And he's been doing it for years, and eventually he starts realizing, I'm just working for the decommissioning department. They're using my cool plans for other SCPs and just using my brain while I sit in detention. And now finally there's a threat they actually need him to help them with, and they go, so do you want to come out of detention and try to solve this problem for us? And they go, yeah, all right, fine, I guess. And then I essentially hijacked Dr. Dan's author avatar, and he is now my character. I have written significantly more about this guy than anybody else, especially the author, who of course dropped 3 banger articles, all of them on 96, and then never wrote anything ever. This is really short, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I was like, oh shit, I actually like writing about other people's stuff, because this was, I think, the first article I ever wrote about somebody else's stuff. And I really had fun with it, because it is kind of fun writing about the old crap. And
adding nuance to it. I mean, the cool thing about what you did here was you made him the recontextualization is how he's used, because he's still the same guy, you know.
Because that article was good. That was one of the few articles way back then where the character has depth, because Dr. Dan was a good author and dipped after 3 pages.
And I like that you turned him into something that like Warren Ellis does a lot of, which is the mad bastard character, the guy who's smarter than everyone else in the room and has no problem telling you about it, but is somehow funny. Like you use your normal skills at making characters have funny things to say, but he is so remarkably unbearably unlikable in moments because he's so right, but he's also still entertaining. Like I never get to the point where I'm just like, ugh, like he just works. But then also what you do well, and just in general with these sorts of articles, is adding that moment of he's certainly still convinced that what he did was right, but it's clearly fucking with him. And you know, hell, that gave me the excuse to then play with that myself when we started doing our joint series. And you know, it just adds so much to this character.
Well, and the reason we're able to do that is because
it was implied.
There's only the 3 articles. There's 096, there's its 2 addenda. That's it. There's nothing else about that character. And so you're able to take every little example of a character tick and go like, oh, he's like that. Oh, he's like this. Right. Oh, he has that kind of thought. So it wasn't actually all that hard to get a sense of who he was and then write something new with him. The idea was, is there a place to take this character and use him now? And the answer is apparently yes, because he's been used enough that he has a character tag. Mostly by me.
I think this might be the tightest Harry tale on the entire site. I saw like tale by Harry blank, and I remember this from the that this was in the contest, but like I just didn't. It's been a minute. I didn't remember reading it. And I finished it. I'm like, oh, that was a Harry blank.
I know,
fascinating. I didn't know you had it in you.
This is how we used to do tales, where they never be more than 2,000 or 3,000 words. You get in, you do your 1 point.
Get in, it did fit. It was it was tight. It did all the work it needed to. And the other thing is that when you pull up Dr. Dan, no one thinks about Dr. Dan.
Right.
People think of Dr. Dan half as much as people think about 353. Right. So but
now they do.
You pull up Dr. Dan. Now they do. But you pull up Dr. Dan and everyone's like, wait a minute. Is this the Dr. Dan I know? And it turns out that both the answer is yes and no. And I also just adore adore the stinger at the end. The stinger at the end is just
really good.
Because it's the one thing to knock him off kilter. The one thing to knock the smug grin off his face. Is he? Wait. You're kidding me, right?
Right. You can't just let him be obnoxiously in control all the time, because that just doesn't happen.
And you set the precedent here of their relationship, and then we got to really play with that even more within His Will Be Done. Like, the two of them are.
Come back to
yes, we will. It's only been a year. People going like, "Where's the rest of it?" Yo, I've been writing one series since 2019. Okay, like a year isn't even that bad.
I'm writing a book series and also a video game. Give me a break.
Both of you actually have time to write. I've written exactly one tale this year.
Hey, I work 50 hours a week, and I still have time to write. So you can find time.
/ search nuclear option. Oh, I've only written like one tale. Yeah, it's at almost 400. You motherfucker.
Jesus Christ.
You got numbers on that tale like it's 2008 again, man.
Just because I only wrote one tale doesn't mean I don't still got it.
You really do still got it.
All right,
I'm happy it worked, but back to focus.
Yeah, let's move on. We're gonna rush. So the one I picked for myself is Sarkic Heat, which is fun. So a little bit of a story. So this is a buddy cop comedy with Dr. Clef and the main SCP of SCP, I think 2091. 2075, which is a metaphysician one. It was one of the earliest, if not the earliest, Sarkic SCP. And that character, other than being sort of a menacing guy who knows everything sort of situation, didn't have a lot of nuance to him, but had, in the same way that I think Dr. Dan did in 096, there was stuff there. Like, he wasn't menacing like he was trying to take over the world. He wasn't an edgelord. There was this sense of like nobility to him, or possibly I just read into that. And I kind of took that and ran with it. And the idea was always to bounce these two ridiculously opposite characters off of each other while still being true to the way that they originally came out. But what's interesting is, so this is in No Return. This is following off of SCP-6500, specifically the Vanguard ending, which is the ending in which the Foundation dissolves and starts, and the leftovers are working with GOIs, or some of them anyway, to essentially, kind of bring people up to speed, undo some of the damage of the Foundation, but also still keep people safe.
Right.
That's the simplest, stupidest explanation, but just that basically sells it. And I was kind of blown away because that concept did not come out until several weeks after we had posted 6500, and Place basically browbeat me into expanding this already way too long article, because I was so convinced, and so was Aetherius, and we've talked about it in the show before, so I won't belabor it, but I was so convinced you will ruin it. This is great. The way we ended this, where we ended on this choice and then kind of let people think about it, and then we later on can flesh it out, okay? We could do it later, and I don't know why he was so intent on it, but he was so convinced it was worth doing. Why? Just because it had never been done?
Because it had never been done and it would never be done again. He looked at the rules and went, the rules say any and all edits are allowed. We did a crazy thing. We posted a 50,000 word article. Right. It's insane. It's really packed with all this stuff. We put so much time and effort into it. We went the full mile. We did the crazy thing knowing it would make us lose the contest, because we knew we were losing the contest. And he went,
still got 6 plates.
So why don't we just double down and do something even more insane and use this edit rule to just drop the same amount of words again on top of that?
Which we didn't quite, but it was close.
It was very close.
Yeah. So my entry for that, because the reason he convinced me was he just kept talking until I had an idea. I don't know. I don't know that he knew that, but you probably
Grigori
did.
will not be down with most crazy ideas until he suddenly thinks what he could do with them, and then he's like, "Yep, I'm on."
I was just so fucking proud of the thing we did. I'm like, I can't fucking believe we did this. You want to blow it up? Like, and the idea was, okay, well, how do we practically address this idea? Okay, fine, the Foundation dissolves. What the fuck does that mean? And then we started talking about what that would mean. And then I was like, well, shit, I gotta write that.
I've got an idea.
And it's basically a long conversation between, 9 or 10 people, all pretty well known. Not all of them known, but pretty well known.
A few boring Canadian characters.
Yeah. And my character thrown in there as well. My director. So it's like about 4 or 5 directors, and then there's 5 or 6 GOI type people, and then there's a few that are just kind of random, well known. And one of the things I threw in there to like act as a foil to this, hey, these are these people that are trying to like figure out how do we actually make something out of the Foundation to address the problems of the Foundation while also addressing these issues that we have, about containment, about normalization. But I just don't want everyone to be like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should fix this. No, there should be conflict. Otherwise, this isn't interesting. And my first thought was, well, what if I just put Clef there? Like, why would he be there? He wouldn't be there. But, let's put him in there. And, he didn't. And the conflict was multi-layered. There's actually a lot of different concerns that are going on in that conversation. But originally I put Clef in there just to be the foil of like old-fashioned dumb, edgelord SCP stuff. But, I wrote, and even had him make good points within the story. And I happened to be on Reddit, which I mostly avoid. And people were discussing, for once nicely, about SCP-6500. And someone said, because there was some people that were very upset about it. And this one, I forget who, made a comment like, you know what I need? I need a buddy cop comedy with Clef and Varus. And I immediately was like, are you going to write that? No, I don't write.
You need that?
I'm like, you're not going to write it? No? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and go home and write that. And I fucking wrote that. And it also gave me an excuse. So there's also kind of a backstory to this. I wrote several tales for the In Memoria Additum canon, which is this very dark, sort of bleak look at the Sarkics, and I've always really liked the lore of the Sarkics, and I realize that's not always people's favorite, but for those of us it hits really hard. And I really loved writing for that canon, but also I think the basic premise of that canon bothers me because it's so dark and it's so bleak, and it basically sets them out to be the bad guys that I think a lot of people outside of the reading of them think they are. But I, wanted to, if that canon ever started up again, I would still continue to develop for it. But I wanted to take a different, strike at that. And this was my excuse to start writing about Sarkics and not be like, oh, I'm redefining what meta did. No. It's that I am looking at them through this different lens, which is how would they behave if, the whole world wasn't out to get them, and also they were given a shot to like live normal lives instead of being crazy flesh, cultists or whatever. And it didn't even start off that way. It was just what could be funny. What could we, in Vanguard, what could we have Clef and Varus deal with? Oh, well, I know, 2408, which is this, Russian mafia, but they're Sarkics and maybe Oryx down there asleep or something. And it just became a whole thing, and now there are 3 of them. And
it's a whole series you've got going now, and they're all very entertaining, but you also take them completely seriously, which helps a lot.
Yeah, so like the entire point, once I started writing it, was these characters exist the way they existed in their original concepts, but I just want to start adding a little more nuance to them. And at first it is not, I don't use this as a character study. It's more about their relationship. It's not even like, I'm not saying that it's romantic, but like it is genuinely like these 2 people that have almost nothing in common. I mean, in dramatic ways, but that are essentially forced to, be together and are bickering half the time, but then also half the time are, fairly appreciative of each other's abilities and experiences. It's fucking so much fun. I've never been I'm so blown away by how well this first tale is done. It's ridiculous. 122. Like, what? Why?
Yeah, those are SCP numbers, not tale numbers.
Yeah.
But one of the things that this tale, kind of harking back to some of the stuff we talked about really early on, about audience. Like, I came into this, and for what it's worth, I'm bad at reading lots of words because I'm a slow reader, so I never finished 6,500.
It's okay. It's 96,000 words.
So many people.
It's
Some
okay.
of the authors
Yeah,
never
like
finished.
I know that I'm not alone in that, but like kind of admitting that in the Wolf's Den is a little risky. But anyways, I came into this article. I also haven't read 2075. Then I wasn't confused playing catch up, but I was playing catch up, right?
Sure.
Like the concepts were confusing, the ideas weren't confusing, but the entire time I'm like I had missed all of the context. So like one of the things for me that was interesting is that like this was like it was a fun buddy cop, but one of the things that I noticed for me is because I had none of the context, like I was spending a lot of my mental capacity trying to make sure I had connected all the dots, and I wasn't like feeling invested in the characters. Now that's not like a failing. That's like one of these things where like because like I was like feel like I was just outside the target audience. That like I was like one piece of background down from being within target audience for this.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's in a canon. So obviously,
exactly, it's in a canon.
It's for a canon, and it's obviously for people that are at least somewhat interested in sarcasm.
Familiar in the canon.
What's hilarious is how many people have come to me and told me that these articles have made them want to go back and read sarcasm, and I'm like, what? This is just my love letter. This is just my love letter to sarcasm. It's not meant to be the introduction. It's playing around.
Yeah.
This is, I don't want to, I would never, I'll never regret putting these things on the wiki because they could only exist on the wiki,
Exactly.
It's playing with the funds, but playing with the funds, playing with the toys. But it's the thing I have always tried to do, especially with these articles, is okay, if you don't, I mean, everybody knows who Clef is, but like if you don't know who Varus is, you don't hopefully need to know. Like, you just be paying.
It wasn't like I felt like I needed to know, but it's like it's one of these things where like coming in, like seeing Varus and like not having a lot of background on who Varus is outside of like the direct relation to the plot. I'm like, I feel like I'm.
Well, that's the thing. He doesn't have
exactly.
There's only one. There's one article, and he's not really characterized that much in it. I really like that article.
That's fair.
But he, and that's why I used him. I was like, I want. Also, his thing is pretty interesting. It's not him making crazy arms and stuff. It's him taking over other people, which is fascinating. But and the whole point of Vanguard for me was I do write action scenes. That's what I do. But like I want to constantly force myself and other people and encourage other people to write stories that are outside the box, where the stories are not solved by an MTF. Even if in this one it seems like that's how it's going to get solved, and it certainly is an action movie, but then it ends with diplomacy, and that's the whole point of Vanguard. I think is like, listen, the Foundation's crazy powerful, big army, lots of money. They can't really take on the world. They've got to convince people that this is the right thing to do, and otherwise it won't work.
I've been writing for like in my entire time writing for the site. I think I have written 2 action sequences. I do not. I am not the Marvel Studios of SCP.
I never thought, because the stuff I wrote before this was not action. The stuff I wrote before SCP, I mean. And nowadays I will frequently find an excuse to put an action sequence into something, even if it's a really intellectual tale. This is not. This is a buddy cop thing, but
I'm always I'm always putting myself in the position where I have to do it, and they take me 4 to 5 times as long as anything else.
I just don't.
They're hard.
I just write stories about people talking.
Sure.
Yeah, I love
and
stuff
talking.
about people
I mean, that's mostly what I
Yeah.
want to do too. I mean, hell, most of this article is people just talking.
Like I've been so blocked lately in writing, and the most progress I've been making, I've been writing thousands of pages, sounds like me, thousands of words every day now with this new strategy I've taken for my book, which is I'm only writing the dialogue right now.
That
I'm just
works.
not writing anything
that
else, because
works.
everything else takes 5 times as long. Dialogue, I can just go.
I mean,
I'm in the
Go ahead.
You go.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I
Bunch of
learned for a while ago that if I'm having trouble writing a scene, I just write the dialogue and then I go back and I start throwing in other stuff.
Yep, I've literally used that in exact same strategy. I have a novel that I started last summer that I need to return to and finish up off the site sort of thing. But yeah, I've used that exact same method where I'm like, well, I don't know what happens here, but I know what words are being said, so...
Right. And I mean, that's why I
Exactly.
find it so, like, I wrote a book about 10 years ago and I didn't do anything with it. And I went to a conference last fall and was convinced by showing people pieces of it that I should be shopping this around. Whether or not it gets published, who knows, right? This is a hard game to get into. But,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, I mean, I'm not fooling myself. But having like a bunch of published authors say, this is good, you should do this. But then also knowing I wrote it 10 years ago and I'm so much more experienced now that I have to revise this. And most of the revising is not in the dialogue because that still flows. It's going back and adding details. It's going back and like the way that I describe, and narrate stuff is better now. So, and it's so hard because I just want to write dialogue.
Every author, much like converging to your alto clef tail or your 682 reimagination, also every author just converges to only wanting to write dialogue, and yet none of us can write for TV. It is the only tiers.
Well, that's not going so well, so I wouldn't.
True. That's also true. That's fair.
Anyway, all right, let's get to this last one. So,
right.
Don't Get Used to It by Captain Kirby.
Why don't you do a dramatic reading of it, and it would take like...
I can. I've practiced this actually.
Oh, do it.
Read it.
Yeah.
Dramatic reading of an entire tale on our podcast.
Yeah. I first practiced reading this because this was intended. I needed to have this read out loud in a certain way, and I needed to make because if it didn't work in reading it out loud, I knew it wouldn't work in text.
Don't Get Used to It by Captain Kirby.
Yeah. 1 year youngs don't understand hate, don't get malice or violence. Evil won't be part of their vocabulary for another 2 years or so. They just see what's around them and they take it in. 6-year youngs, on the other hand, do understand hate. They've developed enough to feel it. They know that churning deep down inside that comes over you and the vision turns red and all you want to do is grab the kitchen knife and start slashing till the blood is everywhere. Then your heartbeat slows down. 30-year-olds also understand hate, but they understand it better. They can live hate. Big hate, little hate, directed hate, universal hate, contempt, disgust, and revulsion too. From their own failures to the failures of others to vicarious failures, they have so many different reasons to hate. However, 6-year youngs and 30-year-olds can't get used to hate. They have to shout at each other and threaten each other and have one beat the other over with their belt because you don't talk back to me like that. And then after the shouting stops, both of them recognize that hate is not a normal thing. 1-year youngs don't understand hate, but if you don't understand something, you can adapt to it. You can mistake it for something entirely normal. That hate is the way things are. That normal dinners consist of yelling and screaming. That on Friday nights, daddy should come home with a slur. That every big sister has bruises across their backs and under their dresses. 1-year youngs can smile, suck on their pacifier, and get used to hate. And 2 years later, when the handcuffed men take away mommy and daddy and bring big sis to the orphanage, they'll find the 3-year-old. They will hate it, and it will hate them right back with a smile. Because the hate will always be there for the 3-year-old. To protect it from love.
It's pretty fucking good. So what is this redefining?
Yeah. So this is this comes back to two other concepts that I talked about before. First of all, how you can rewrite an SCP.
Right.
You can rewrite the what of an SCP, the how of an SCP. This is rewriting the why of an SCP.
Right.
Secondly, we talked about like percentage of like payoff to setup and setup to payoff. By virtue of this tale essentially being a tableau, you could almost articulate it as entirely set up. There's an argument that like around the third paragraph is where you start to get payoff and climax, but realistically, the twist, the aha moment comes at the very end, because the last word love is cross-linked to SCP-053.
Oh.
Yet another SCP in Series 1 nobody thinks about. That is by Dr. Gears, called The Little Girl, I think, something like that. Which, fun fact, used to have a picture of his daughter, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is an SCP about a 3-year-old.
Hello? Uh-oh.
It like harkens back to all the stuff we've been talking about. Like, I wrote this because I think the original like work is so flat, and there's gotta be more you can do with it.
Yep.
There's
one of the few things by Gears that I just think is
kind of flat. It's an article where it both works without the setup, but like without any of the context, because the idea is the twist at the end, but also is like almost entirely could be framed as just setup for it. It's the recontextualizing the why of an SCP, and like ultimately, the thing I have to say is I actually wrote this because I was in an IRC chat with someone. I don't actually remember who. It's not someone I see around anymore. And they were talking about how like they just got in another shouting match with their parents, and everyone's like, "Are you okay?" And they're just like, "It's fine. I get used to it." And I'm like, "What?
Well,
that's not
the way
that's not something you should get used to." And I didn't like told them that I wrote this because of that, because like it's their life. I'm not gonna like be like, here's my tale about why the thing you said was why I disagree. I wouldn't do that. But like I immediately had that, and then like all the pieces clicked for me. I pounded this out in a night, got it like crit for 2 days, and like it's definitely the shortest thing that I'm pretty confident that coming in at like 250 words is like the shortest thing I've ever written for the site.
It's effective though, and the thing I think I really like about it, I mean, I think it's really good, you know, what it is all by itself. The thing I really like about it is like it actually works better without knowing what 053 is. At least I think so. I didn't know what 053 was.
Piece and people would find it great anyway.
Yeah, it just would be like, oh wow, that's fucked up. But I think it really works with that last link, because then I go back and I think, you know, I realize immediately, okay, that tale was not written as part of this, but like it could have been, and it would have added a lot to this SCP. And so thinking about them together, like it really, you know, works really.
Yeah, like
well.
if 053 had been written as a modern SCP and there had been a way to incorporate this tale as the note at the end, 053 would be a classic.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's
It'd be like, oh my god, that was the one that does that amazing monologue about hate. That would be great.
So many of these articles we've talked about are about like, oh, that's clever, you know, and this one doesn't work like that at all, and I love that. Like this one works as this one works as like this one works better as an introduction to a concept by setting the tone. By reading about, oh wow, and just how dark that is, and then I click over that thing and I see that little girl and that guy behind her with a knife, and it's like, oh, okay,
it makes it better. And that's
it just you know,
recontextualization that I think we're trying to get at over this whole time, is that if you can make the existing thing feel better because of what you were able to do with it, then that's the game won right there.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I'm sorry. We're gonna move to emails. I love
Perfectly
that.
reasonable.
I love that. I'm not trying to rush out of your article.
No, I got you.
We've been talking for a minute.
We've been here for a minute.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
did all right though. We made it.
We're
the emails, 3 of them.
Yeah, we only got 3 this time, which is good. And we're not going to be too long of an episode. All right, Kirby, why don't you read this first one from Fern?
All right, gladly. As always, listening to this podcast is very fun, and this episode has me excited. Since you're talking about reframing characters and stories, would you ever do an episode on dead canons?
Yeah.
Most of the ones that are dead for a reason.
Are they?
Depends on how you define
We're doing
dead.
an episode on the old man in the sea. Are you excited?
I don't even know what it is, so maybe.
I know you don't. Grigori, we're going to do an episode on Doctors of the Church. Are you excited?
No.
Yeah.
And also, just like GOIs, no one is promising we do an episode on all of them.
Yes, no.
Hey, guess what? Dread and Circuses. No.
Oh, come on.
Sorry. What's Dread and Circuses? I've decided that I don't know what that is.
Me either.
And my life has been better for it.
Exactly.
All right.
All right. Not to say that anyone. I know people that have written for it that I respect. That's not to say.
Friends with some people
Yeah, that's right.
There are some concepts in there that I just don't enjoy.
Yeah, like I just hate clowns. I'm not scared of them. I don't like them. They look gross. Yeah, you bet your fucking ass. Take them all out back behind the chemical shed and shoot them.
You know, if there's a type of
that was a V for Vendetta reference. If you haven't been paying attention. Anyway,
what a mix. V for Vendetta and clowns. Well, he does wear a mask.
He does. Yeah, he's very theatrical as well.
D for Clowndetta?
Good God.
Oh, God.
But there are lots of dead canons that are dead because people stopped writing for them, not because they weren't interesting. And that's true of like Tale series and everything else. So no, I mean, I'm interested
it's true.
for
There
the
are
same.
Lots of dead canons because Jork just stopped writing.
That's right. Yeah. I just like the way that finding out that I actually really appreciate Wondertainment, which I never would have thought before we did that episode and had Dark Stuff on. I even sort of think a little bit more fondly about Chaos Insurgency because of that episode we did on them. Even though that episode was entirely us saying, this concept sucks, here's some examples where they did a good job.
It's true.
Harry, why don't you read this one from Montague?
Sure. Montague. Today's topic of discussion is basically my SCP life story. I absolutely love the process of taking existing characters / narratives / settings and twisting them around until they become something new again. My very first SCP was itself a reimagining of classic SCP characters / mythology, as is the article I'm, at time of writing, currently working on. I truly cannot get enough of this stuff, so I've been quite excited for this episode. Now, for recommendations. If you're looking for reimaginings in general, you can't go wrong with the Reimagined Hub by Felix Zhu and Einar von Rabe. That's true. It's exactly what it sounds like. SCP-5683, Will You Walk Into My Parlor, Set a Spider to a Fly, by Tanhoney, and SCP-6820, Termination Attempt by Peter Solder McD, Steph Lynch, and Liren, are 2 outstanding reimaginings of everyone's favorite evil lizard, the former being a nightmarish retread of the original SCP's concept, while the latter is the logical extreme of, well, SCP-682 Termination Attempts. Yes, indeed it is. If you'll excuse a bit of shameless self-promotion, well, we would be really hypocritical not to after what we did. I also suggest reading SCP-7408, Metamorphosis, by yours truly. That would be Montague, etc., I believe.
Yeah.
Which remakes both SCP-408, Illusory Butterflies, and the old author avatar Dr. Kondraki, reimagining him as an Are We Cool Yet? An artist turned Foundation researcher. That reminds me, those are like some of the most... Thanks for the email, Montague, as well, and definitely go check that out. Also, that reminds me, that's one of the most well-known recontextualizations. There's Friendly Vandals, Portraits of My Father, recontextualization of Kondraki that creates, like, Kondraki's kid, and then Talaran from Stonefish's thing, and they get together, and that's, like, a really, really famous example. And then there's also the Montauk House one with Clef that reimagines as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
honestly, I thought you were going to say...
edgy.
They are very
Yeah.
edgy. Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say actually one of the other reimaginings is like a Cool War as reimagining Are We Cool
Sure.
Yet? Because Are
Oh,
We
yeah.
Cool Yet was originally essentially like art as an excuse for terrorism. And
Yeah.
then Are We Cool Yet is like, and then the Cool War just takes them and like makes them actually like artists, but in all types of ways, from like the snooty like gallery curators to
Yeah.
like the hipsters doing stuff. Yeah, Are We Cool Yet goes hard, and if you haven't read it yet, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How have you not
Cool
read
War
the
stuff
Cool
is
War
very
yet?
Cool War is really
It's
good.
Very funny and very clever. The ones that I suggested are also like content warning. No kids allowed.
Yeah,
For
Montauk House
and
is rough.
Anything by the Friendly Vandal, I think, is no kids allowed.
Portraits of Your Father was recommended by somebody for this show, but it's just too much. There's too much to cover.
It's like 10,000 words long.
It's amazing. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's what if Kondraki was a human being? It's funny how many things that I think
know,
are good reimaginings are. What if this person was not a caricature?
Well, I mean, when we have so many AA, author avatars that are like, what is this? There's a talking dog, for Christ's sake. Anyway. All right.
Character studies are fun.
They are. Character studies are great. Shit. Some of my favorite movies are basically just character studies.
Some of my best friends are characters.
Yeah. So the last...
I deserve that.
No. What? That's not how I intended it. All right, so I'm going to read this last email. UNC Griffin says, "Hi there. I think one of the coolest things about the wiki is that there's a core agreed upon mythos that is constantly being turned upside down in awesome ways while still leaving it recognizable. There's sort of a rush I feel whenever I realize the source material of an article that I haven't truly felt anywhere else." Yeah, definitely. You might have asked this already, but do you ever struggle to finish drafts? Whether from a sudden decrease in inspiration or simply having no idea how to end a story? If so, how do you deal with it? It can be hard.
Funny enough, like,
Go
for
ahead.
me, like in some ways the answer is no, in some ways yes. Because I effectively write most of my stories backwards. Like I start from an ending and then work backwards to get there. So I always know how it's going to be finished. It's just actually the hardest part for me in writing any story is writing a middle, because I need to figure out how to properly put in all of my setups to justify my payoff. But sometimes if you have too much setup to justify a payoff, you have to put payoffs in between, and now you have threads and character arcs, and now you're telling a story, and who wants to tell a story? Ew.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I have that too. If I can't see the end in sight, then I have trouble. But like if it is finishable, then I'm on the easiest part of my writing process, the finishing part.
weirdly, the way I most frequently struggle is connecting to that ending I imagined in the first place. And not because I just mean sometimes it's about motivation less than I don't know how to do it, especially frequently or especially recently. It's like energy levels, because I work so goddamn much, and then we're also doing this podcast, and every podcast takes like roughly 6 hours, and I work like 50 hours, and I've got a personal life, and so
Wow.
frequently
Choose one.
What?
Choose one, he said.
No,
Choose one.
No, I won't. But
Have it
honestly, I frequently struggle with. Okay, I know where this goes, and I've written the first 2/3 of it. If I've bothered to write it chronologically, which normally I don't. Normally I write it kind of in bits and pieces and then fit the pieces together. But even then, it's the fitting them together that sometimes I struggle with. It's like, okay, I have this, and then I have this. The connective tissue is sometimes very difficult. And even if I know what the ending is, it's like, okay, well, I need these 2 plot points. I know what they are. How the fuck do I get there without it just being ham-fisted?
Right.
What I don't struggle with oftentimes is the ones where I don't have any of that figured out. Those are the ones I never struggle at all. It's
no
just
expectations, and they just happen.
it just I'm just like, wouldn't this be cool if I did this? And then it just kind of evolves because I didn't have a plan. When I do have the plan and I know exactly where it's going, that's where sometimes I falter. How I deal with it, I normally take a walk or work out. That oftentimes will get my brain going because I can't I'm not focused on anything. And I listen to music a lot too, like specifically lyrics, because I can hear a lyric and sometimes mishear a lyric, and go, oh, I know what I need to do. Even if I'm not even copying, it's just the thing I felt in that lyric, and I'm like, okay, I need to recreate that. Yeah.
That's funny you would say that, because like not at all for the same reason I like to listen to music with lyrics. I like to listen to something that's really amped up and like something I think is a real banger, and I'll sometimes listen to them on loop, or set a playlist of songs that I really, really like because they just energize my brain. Like when we were writing 6500, I wrote most of my the Path of the Warrior to just a loop of some like really high octane mother songs that like I really enjoyed, and it just felt like I had enough energy, and it kind of comes through in like the fight scenes and everything that I wrote in that are just completely energized and weird and just like totally over the top. And it's because I was sitting there vibrating in my seat, just like sweeping my hand across the keyboard like it was a piano, just because I was really into the mood. And when I'm not listening to music, I often find I'm just sitting here like a fucking sloth, like bleh, and then I don't get as much done.
That's funny because I can't work on other stuff when it's lyrical music playing. So I use them to like get my brain out of whatever funk,
and then you stop it,
and then I stop it. And normally it's when I'm out on a walk or a hike or while I'm working out, or if I'm let me go take a I'm just gonna clear my head, I'm gonna take a shower, I'm gonna turn on this album, and we're just gonna let shit go. But then if I'm going to work, whether it's on work stuff or on or fiction, it's almost always game OSTs.
Oh yeah,
instrumental OSTs.
That's funny.
Like, I don't know how much of my stuff on the wiki and my professional life has been written to the Bloodborne OST on repeat. A lot of it. Most of my law school...
That explains a lot, man.
Most of my law school studying was done to the Bloodborne OST on repeat.
That's funny.
All right. Okay, I was going to read all the different suggestions we didn't get to, but this episode's gone long enough. So we're going to get going. If you have an email and you want to send it in to us, it doesn't even have to be on the subject of the show. We love the random list of questions. It's really fun. The email is...
some of the shit we've read out loud, it's been nonsensical.
Exactly. We got an email address. It's simplycreativepeople@gmail.com. The show's Twitter is SIMCREAT, SimCreate. My Twitter is @GrigoriCarpet.
@Harry Blank, SCP.
Kirby, you want to plug anything?
What's a Twitter?
You don't have to plug
I will
Twitter.
plug something.
I was going to make that joke, and I just left it for you because I'm a good host.
I appreciate that. I will plug that SCP Object Class Podcast is the podcast that me and ARD did a few years back for a stint of 12, 13 episodes where we talk about different writing concepts on the site and kind of investigating not necessarily specific articles, but different components that are used on the site, different themes, different styles, and some different toolboxes that people use and how they're used on the site. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, that's out there.
Mm-hmm. It sounds boring. No, I'm just kidding. It sounds great. It's great.
I podcast about
yeah. Who the fuck would listen to that? No, I've listened to a couple episodes. It's pretty good. I'm sad you guys aren't doing it anymore. But anyway, all right. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely, it was great.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time on.
No, it's great.
We'll see you again when death ends.
Hopefully it'll be soon.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of it, so death needs to just no more of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hashtag end death.
Hashtag end death.